Welcome back, movie lovers. Thank you for coming to another installment of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster, and with me today, returning to the stream, but for the very first time as my brand new co-host, the cinephile in training, the one, the only, Aemy Blackfyre.
Yes.
Welcome, Amy.
I'm so excited to be here and to officially wear my co-host crown.
I know, it's like... Which, by the way, I'm going to interrupt for a moment because I hear a slight echo.
Oh,
Not sure why that is, but you do have your headphones on, so I'm not sure where that's coming from. But that's okay.
I can come back in a different internet browser if it keeps going.
Okay, guys, let me know if you hear it. If you do, we'll try that. But in the meantime, I will press forward. So I kind of feel like, even though I did just ask you a short time ago, this, for me, it's been kind of a long time coming because it's something that's been in the back of my head. Because we became pretty fast friends almost immediately after we met, because we bonded over our mutual love of a certain actress. And surprisingly, more and more I've been able to get you to get immersed in films. And actually, I'm seeing that we do have an echo, so did you want to try?
It says when you talk, though, surprisingly, but I don't know if it means both of us or what. Oh. Yeah, Kate says when John talks, so I'm not sure what's up with that.
Yeah, I don't know. But I don't hear it now. Okay. So let's...
I don't hear it at all, so I can't help.
Okay. It seems to be gone now, I think. So, okay, let that be our complication for the day. But
yes, please, internet gods.
Yeah, just let's start off just by me asking you, like, this is tongue-in-cheek because we're friends, but why did you say yes, Amy?
Well, one of the reasons I said yes is I'm actually the show queen. I love shows. 15th and last season of Supernatural is airing now, and I've been there since season 1. I love long-form storytelling, but you are quickly kind of converting me to also loving what storytelling can happen in 2 hours and how impressive that is, right? So my newfound love of movies is one thing. And I do have a love of going to the movies, but just kind of sitting around and watching movies, that's newer for me. And I think another reason I said yes is that it's going to be a little over 2 hours for this stream and then 2 hours to watch a movie. That's like 5-ish hours a week. And I can do that. Whereas if someone else was like, hey, come on to my channel where I do this insane amount of research, that's a lot of time away. And as you all that know me, I'm a PhD student. So free time is not really something that I have, but I like to use my time for things that I love. And I love talking about great movies and shows and books. And so I thought this would be fun. And as you all know, I love me some feminist analysis. And I am trained in literary and feminist analysis, and I love applying that to movies. So it's going to be fun. I'm already having a good time because we've already done about 4-ish streams together, right, John? I would say.
Yes.
So we already have a bit of a rhythm going. So when you asked me to be your co-host, I thought it was a great fit.
And I think we can probably assure everybody that now that it's official and we're on here together, there will be more Keira Knightley streams. Definitely. We may or may not have actually started up a new Instagram page for the Knights of Keira. So yeah, that'll be
K-O-K, not cock, K-O-K. That was to some of you in the chat that call us cocks. We're K-O-K.
Yeah. So yeah, we're starting off today, as I'm assuming a lot of you will be able to tell by our background, with Mad Max Fury Road, which for me, I have to say, it's a surprise that I fell in love with this movie so much. I want to know, when did you see it, Amy?
Was it 2015 that it came out, John?
Yes.
I saw it a year later. So I saw it in 2016. I was in Colorado doing my master's. And I was on a date with a guy, and he was like, let's watch this movie. And it's basically one big car chase scene. I was like, I'm in. And the first time I saw it, I just took it as a car chase scene. But on this rewatch, I noticed a lot of really heavy themes and commentary going on. But when I first saw it, I was there for the action. Never done with our queen. But yeah, so that's the first time that I watched it, was just with this dude at his house. I think we made popcorn and we just watched Mad Max, and we had a really good time. And this is my only Mad Max movie I've seen. So I unfortunately cannot bring any knowledge about the previous movies. So I'm looking at this purely in itself as a contained movie, a contained art piece.
Yeah, I also, give me 1 second, folks. I'm going to try something because I am still echoing. I'm going to unplug and plug my mic back in. So just wait 1 moment.
And in the meantime, I will show you all my margarita that I made today. Totally normal size cocktail over here for the Patriarchy drinking game. Anytime you hear me tangentially or directly talk about the Patriarchy, you can just give it a little drink.
Okay, I'm not sure if that worked or not, but we will, but I'm giving it a shot. Hopefully no more echoey. Yeah, I did see this in 2015, right when it came out. I was not a Mad Max fan. I'll be completely honest, because the movies I would always see clips from them and stuff, and they looked a little weird, just out there. It wasn't really my thing. And I think the fact that the films were older and I hadn't seen them growing up. But when I saw the previews for this movie, just the look of it, the outrageous colors, the stunt work, especially at the time when there were other movies out, might start with an H and end with Obbit, that were very overboard with CGI and animated characters and all that stuff. And then this preview for this movie comes out, and yeah, I mean, there's visual effects in it, but so much real stunt work, and it felt like real just watching the trailers. And I said to myself, you know what? I've never been into Mad Max, but this looks amazing. And then, of course, the fact that you could tell in the previews that, yeah, it's called Mad Max, but Charlize just radiated off the screen.
Yes, she's the main character.
It was easy to see that this was going to be her show. And I do want to throw up the poster, one of the posters for this film real quick, because I love it so much. It's so like, even though I wasn't a Mad Max fan, it seems like it would be classic Mad Max.
Yeah.
This was actually
the exploding and the cars, right? This big rig. Yeah. And then the orange colors.
Yeah. It's just, it looks great. Oh boy, I still hear myself, but we're just gonna have to live with it, folks. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah, of course there had to be something that went wrong.
We can't, our first time, it can't go smoothly. So it's bad luck if it goes well.
Yeah, so this is Charlize's show, and she really is badass in this. Let's just say it. And also, let's see, hold on, let me take this down, because I actually do have an outline today, so I'm going to follow it. But talking about Furiosa, she's very much the heart of this story. And I like the fact that she's presented as the sort of the new road warrior for this story. And Max is kind of like, we were actually talking about this with Pat Spinagle on Twitter.
I have yesterday. Ready to read, if you don't mind, John.
Yeah. Read his words first, so I don't speak for him.
Yeah. So Patrick Spinagle at Patman23 on Twitter is one of our mutual friends in the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom. And he has seen the other Mad Max movies, and he had a really good thread that he commented. And so I really just want to read that out. He says, I'm a fan of Fury Road. The timeline is a bit wonky with Max still relatively young, but the world seemingly further removed from the modern world. I opted to view the movie not literally, but as a kind of story that would rise up in the future. Someone telling me the story of Furiosa, who legit overthrew the Immortan Joe by stealing his wives, wearing out his forces, and then destroying them and taking the Citadel. But since we know that Mad Max lives on in the stories we're told at the end of Road Warrior, the story of Furiosa gets an Arthurian treatment where an older hero legend story gets pulled into a later one to kind of give it some more zest. Now I hear myself. That's great. In this way, the mantle of the older hero story gets reinvigorated into the new hero's timeline story. In Fury Road, the timeless character of Max actually gives Furiosa a blood transfusion, something that's in this movie, making these two heroes bound in a bloodline of badassedness. So I imagine that the real story of the historical Furiosa didn't have Max in it, since he'd been dead for real, but this is a mythic telling that we're watching. And I just love that. It's exactly kind of the kind of explanation about the timeline that I needed.
Yeah, it's clear to me that obviously time-wise, if we go by the original Mad Max films, it seems highly unlikely that Max could be around as you know, being as young as he is. But I do like the idea that he's a mythic character. And he sort of enters this story as something out of legend. And then at the end of the film, he fades, you know, into the crowd and disappears.
Yeah, it's almost like a specter, right?
Yeah.
Of himself. And I think that, and like you were saying, you know, Furiosa, Charlize Theron, you were talking about how she's the main character. She's the boss too. She's kind of the protege of, is it Immortan Joe? Is that how you would say it?
Yeah.
So she's kind of, he gives her a lot of trust. He literally gives her this war machine, and she's in charge of his war boys, right? So when she says, we're going east, let's turn, you know, a guy kind of crawls as they're moving, crawls to the window and says, what's up, boss? You know, what's going on? And she's like, we're going east. And he goes, okay. And he gives the orders. And they're like, why? He said, those are the orders. Like, she's the boss in this movie. And I love that because she does not shy away from that leadership role.
Yeah. I love that there's that unflinching trust that the war boys have her, because it just shows what they've kind of probably been through together, and she's counting on that. And there's this, what I love is that she doesn't even say a word in the film and she still resists it. She finally says, we're going east.
Yeah.
Because she has to at that point, because she has to give an answer. But she knows that the less she says, the better, the longer she can go and the more authority she wields, because if she's coming up with, like, if she starts scrambling for explanations,
yeah,
it's going to give the game away. But that's not her style anyway, because she has such a commanding presence. So
absolutely, we do not see her get emotional until that kind of climax of the film, which we'll of course talk about, where they get to where they think they're trying to get to, right?
Now, Stephen brings up a good. Oh, I just brought up.
Also, AK in the house. Hey, girl.
Anyone else think Furiosa was a former breeder? Very much when we get to the end of the film and she says, remember me. I mean, for me, I think that's very much implied.
I think so as well, Stephen. I think you really picked up on that. Really, it's a very nuanced point.
And Charlize actually has, we're on a first name basis. I call her Charlize.
I call her Char Char, so.
She very much has that interpretation that her character's drive is, I mean, yes, she wants to help the girls, but what's at the core of it for her is this is a guy who hurt her, and he's going to hurt him back by taking what's important to him.
And not just hurt her, but owned her. If we can just talk about Immortan John as a patriarchal figure, Drink.
Joe, wait. Don't.
Joe. Oh my God, John, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to. That's a slander. No. Immortan Joe, right? As a patriarchal figure. No, John is a feminist. Don't worry, I've checked him out. So they call him father, right? And he is kind of the father of these war boys who are these, like, they're all white skinheads. I mean, it's pretty, it's a very obvious kind of color choice that they're that white with these like black eyes, right? And they're all men, right? And they're all his proteges. And so he at one point owned her and still thinks that he owns her, Furiosa. And he has nothing but confidence that she's going to go to Gas Town and she's going to get that gas like a good little girl and then come back and go back to being his little pet, right? But he doesn't think that she would have this. He thinks that she's so whipped into submission. He can't even imagine that she would have sympathy for these other women and see herself in them and want to help them. And that's what we get, right? We get her as the motherly figure of these women and trying to protect them, right? So we have these dual mother and father figures. And in the end, motherhood wins, basically.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. That was the worst tongue slip ever. And we're to Joe.
The true feelings come out.
It was a Freudian slip.
Yeah, the thing about an Immortan Joe is like a terrifying character, and he's very reminiscent of obviously a lot of dictators or would-be dictators. And I did write down like I'm going out of order because I had stuff off the top of the film that I wanted to talk about, but we'll get there. There's something that he says as he's, giving his speech, just as, he's about to give that little bit of water that he can spare to his people, where he says, "I am your redeemer. It is by my hand you will rise from the ashes of this world." It's like those people, you need me. It's only through my goodness that you'll survive, and you should be thankful for that.
Yes, and as if this all-controlling father figure, he can give and he can take away, right? He gets them just get a little bit of water, and then he turns it off and says, "Don't get too addicted," right? So it's only when he feels kind that you'll get anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, Stephen's on the mark here of it being, basically a death cult. And what's interesting is George Miller actually put out a black and white version of this film, and the war boys look even more sort of otherworldly when you strip all the color out. They almost look like aliens practically. So it's interesting the way they're designed. And they've been raised, all they know is servitude to the Immortan, and that he's going to walk them to the gates of Valhalla.
Yes.
And it really shows the danger of cults and how, minds are warped. And so to them, you feel that bond or that love that they have for him, and it's really twisted.
As followers have a twisted love for their cult leader. And this idea of, and religion is just one step from religion goes straight into cult. So they have, like you said, Valhalla, right? This idea of where warriors go, they're called war boys. So it's all about fighting to your death. And they have this one phrase, which you tweeted out, John, which is witness, right? Witness me. There are these religious terms that are used to their extreme, right? I know, right? Arrogance so wasteful. Like, come on, it's post-apocalyptic, right? So don't waste anything. And even I would even argue that the green place itself is also kind of a religious term. It reminds me of the Garden of the Eden or the Promised Land, right? There are these kinds of religious concepts that drive people for good or for ill, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's in Aaron, it does seem to me a way to keep them. I mean, it's totally to keep them in line and to give them this vision of what lies ahead. And so many of them are sickly. So you get to do this outrageous stuff, and, you know, all with the promise of the glory of the afterlife. But I do want to step back and talk about just the opening of this film, because I don't even think I really appreciated it at the time that I saw it, because so many of these lines were actually used in the trailers, because they're great trailer lines. But the whole film starts off with a monologue, an interior monologue from Max. He says, "My name is Max. My world is fire and blood." Where have we heard that?
What? I don't know.
Once I was a cop, a road warrior, searching for a righteous cause. As the world fell, each of us in our own way was broken. It was hard to know who was more crazy, me or everyone else. I mean, that's just a great way to start off a movie.
It is. And he has this kind of PTSD going on, right? He keeps having these visions in the beginning and then throughout the film of people that, you know, especially children, right, that are calling out to him. And so it's also, his monologue is also a manifestation of his own guilt as well. And you know, we have with yes.
Everybody is a secret target.
Everybody is a secret target. But I think Max also kind of serves as a foil to Furiosa, in that he is more skeptical of the world. And it's not that she's naive, but that she does still have some belief, right? She still has belief in the mini mothers and the green place, right? And whenever they do, and I'm sorry, this is really skipping ahead, but whenever they do get there, the first thing Max says is, "That's a trap," right? He has this pessimism that I think Furiosa, you know.
I do want to say that
it's a trap.
What he says, and it's one of my favorite memes in the world. He says, "That's bait."
Oh, that's bait. Yeah, sorry.
That is used all the time on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. It's not that it's a trap, that it's bait. Yeah. Yeah. That is perfect for Twitter, though.
But yeah, and what I like, and again, this is a lot of stuff that I didn't appreciate on my first viewing, because when you see the film the first time, Furiosa is the star. So you latch on to Charlize and
I mean,
Tom,
who wouldn't?
Yeah. Exactly. I meant that figuratively. But also, and I don't want to get into a discussion about, you know, actors' private lives and personalities, so we're going to steer clear of that. But I will say that Tom Hardy's Max is much different from Mel Gibson's in Max, because I've actually seen The Road Warrior, and Mel's Max is more kind of this personable, you know, charming rogue type of character. Tom Hardy's Max is so traumatized by what he's been through. And one of the touches that I love is that he's described as, by one of the other characters, as a raging feral. He is very feral. The way he speaks is like he's an animal almost. And one has to wonder how long it's been since he actually opened his mouth to anybody, because for a good portion of the beginning of the film, he's practically growling. And it's only throughout the course of the film that his voice starts to come out. And I think that's a really nice progression for the character. He's not immediately like the likable hero that we might want. That's Furiosa. she's the one that we really root for. But I do think that Max is interesting in this, and it'll be interesting to see if George Miller pursues more stories with that character anytime in the near future, because, and we're going to talk about this towards the end of the stream, we are getting a Furiosa prequel story, which of course we are, because why wouldn't we?
But I believe it's not going to be Charlize, correct, John?
That's true. But
it's fine. I'll give it a chance.
Let's save that, because we can definitely talk about that. But yeah, so the film starts off where Max is basically running from the war boys who and this is the thing, we don't even know how much of a world there is beyond this area, because we know when they head in the other direction, he says there's nothing that way. So what is there from the direction he came? And this is why I really like the idea of Max as sort of this mythical hero that just sort of enters the story.
Yeah.
Because how did he possibly survive out there on his own? Presumably he's had to get, gas to keep his car running, which of course is the Interceptor, which I think old Mad Max fans, love that car, obviously.
Yeah.
It doesn't get treated so well in this one.
A lot of cars blow up, though, to be fair. But it's a lot of them get rammed and damaged in this film. But he's running from them, right? And he is apprehended, and he makes a really, really solid attempt to escape. I mean, he got pretty close. That's interesting.
Yeah, Alicia, I've heard this, and I actually like it. I'm not sure that George Miller, he may have commented on that, and I think he said I think he said he hadn't considered it, which is not the same thing as him saying you can't think that. But again, it plays into the whole thing with myth and the fact that both can be true. This can be partly Max from the original films. It can also be that character of the feral kid, because I like the idea that this is a story being told and that elements have been added. It's like Pat said, where you have the story of Furiosa, which may have happened, but then some storyteller says, there's this heroic figure, Max. Let's bring him into the story. And so the fact that the feral kid is this character from the Road Warrior, and even, you can say that, there's elements of that character coming in, which is why for certain films, I often like to take a less literal sort of view of the film. And this is one of those, because so much of this is so surreal, and I like placing it in the realm of being a legend rather than something that may have completely factually happened.
Yes.
Which, by the way, everybody, I do have my orange juice today.
Yay!
I would not do this stream without.
But so yeah, and in kind of like what we talked about with Steven in our hero stream is that, in that movie we get a lot of different versions of the truth, right? There is not necessarily one version of the truth, right? It's kind of a retelling, and it reminds me a lot of oral history, in that it's been retold so many times that, there are elements of truth, but there are characters added in or taken out, or characters are merged. And so, we can just enjoy the story as it is. And we know that the elements of it themselves are there and are important, right? But I think what's interesting is that he tries to, as Pat said, he talked about a blood transfusion into the story, right? Mad Max literally becomes a blood bag. And I think Pat was obviously word playing there. They not only do they imprison him, but they use him as a human blood bag for one of the war boys, which is could have a lot of different connotations to it, and a lot of symbolism going on, right? Literally sucking the life out of him, and really sucking whatever hope he had left out of him for escape and for, moving on with whatever life he was leading. I mean, he was very PTSD ridden, so he was not having a great life. But he is literally being he's being drained, just as I would argue the women, the breeders, are being drained as well, right? They're being drained of their milk, and they're being drained of their life force, and they're forced to reproduce against their will. So you do see men and women both in their own ways being drained by Immortan Joe, and you see everyone is being used by this cult leader for whatever life force is left in them, right? And the war boys themselves are being drained and fed this kind of this cult teachings of fighting until the death, and the Fury Road, right? As you drive the Fury Road to hell, basically, or Valhalla, I guess. This is in a good way. The Valhalla is, for warriors, they are rewarded for dying in battle, right? And there's also the idea that you need to, I don't know how canon this is, but you need to die with your sword in hand to go to Valhalla, right? They need to die with wheel in hand, right?
Nux says this line. He says, "If I'm going to die historic on the Fury Road."
Yeah, so you die on the road in your car as it explodes. Like I said, lots of cars explode in this movie, right? And that is your ticket to Valhalla, right? It shows that you stood, you stayed until the end. And we do get that one war boy who is using Mad Max as his blood bag. We do get him become disillusioned with the cult, which is very common in cults. And I unfortunately know too much perhaps about cults because I am very, very interested, and I listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of articles. But it's very common for people to become disillusioned with the cult and actually feel like they lose their reason for being and for living. And we really see that with the one war boy who's using Mad Max as his blood bag.
And I do want to say that, of course, that character his name is Nux, and he's played by Nicholas Hoult, who is almost unrecognizable. And actually, the one who rides with him, his name is Slit. He's actually Slick. He's actually played by, let me bring up the guy's name, Josh Hellman. What's interesting for you and me, Amy, is that both of them were in the newer X-Men films. And Nicholas Hoult plays Beast, and Slick plays, what's the character's name? The military guy who tapes him in for experimentation.
Wow, you were not kidding when you said he was unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea those were the same people, same person. That's crazy. Wow, yeah. And I mean, and it also the makeup and the cost, the makeup and us, like also the kind of tattoos that they have really makes them look otherworldly. Yeah, it's crazy. I did not recognize him at all. That's insane. Hopefully we'll have some future X-Men streams coming up, because that's another thing that we share is our love of X-Men. So.
Oh yeah, we're going to. Which, by the way, people, and this is diverting for a second, but just so you know, we mentioned this on last weekend's Here Be Dragon stream, but we have like a massive list of movies. We compiled it's now over 130 movies.
Yeah.
So if you enjoy this at all, there's lots more coming. And while I say that, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can click on pointing the wrong way. There's a little logo in the corner. Just click on that to subscribe. Okay, so I've done my
all the plugs. Yeah.
Okay, so where do we go now?
So I was actually going to mention the first time where we see this setup that he has, that Immortan Joe has of the women, right? So there's a man who looks through a telescope and sees that Furiosa is veered off course, and Immortan Joe is like, that's suspicious. Right?
Can we actually? I do want to mention that because Joe actually has two sons. we have and the guy looking through the telescope, who actually, I think it's very specifically done that that this son looks basically, as a child, and as a baby. His name is Corpus, and I almost wonder if this is, and I'm not saying this just because, smaller in stature, but you almost wonder if there is a Tyrion Tywin dynamic there, because he seems to be the one with more wits of the two children. But you wonder, knowing sort of what kind of person Immortan Joe is, he probably still doesn't think much of that son, even so. We don't get to see much of that dynamic, but I like the fact that he's the one who's kind of, he first catches that Furiosa is going off course.
Yeah.
And he says to the other son, Richest, go see what's agitating dad. Like, he's the one keeping his brother on point. And Richest is like the ultimate representation of the man child.
Yeah.
Like toxic masculinity personified, who is always firing off guns and showing his strength.
Yeah, there's one is the brain and one is the brawn. And also Corpus, this goes back to this idea that Stephen was talking about as a death cult. It means body, right? Like Corpus Christi, the body of Christ, right? It's also kind of a part of this death cult. So we have the smaller in statue son, right, telling him to go check on Immortan Joe, right? And he goes there, and this really freaked me out the first time I watched it, but he's going in, and there are these women with the machines attached to their breasts, just sucking the milk out of them. And it's really weird when you first see it. And then he looks into this room, and there are all of these single beds right next to each other, right? And there's an older woman there who's kind of ready to confront him. You can tell she's ready for this to happen. And they've written around messages, as such as, we are not things, right? Our babies will not be warlords, right? They are leaving their messages to Joe and letting him know why they're doing what they're doing, right? And he's basically, that's when we learn that Furiosa has taken these women, which he calls breeders, and they are forced to have his children, which is one heck of an example of the patriarchy, right? And it reminds me a lot of Handmaid's Tale as well. And they are literally called breeders. And I think later on they say we are not breeding stock, right? They are animalized, and they are and thus dehumanized. And they are seen only for their reproductive abilities, which is a very, very common trope in feminist analysis, which is noticing when women have been reduced to their reproductive abilities and nothing else.
Yeah, when Nux notices that everybody is sort of heading out, he's like, what's going on? And one of the other war boys says, Furiosa, she took stuff from Immortan Joe. And he says, what stuff? And the other one says, breeders, his prize breeders. He wants them back. And so that's how they're viewed.
Yeah, it sounds like she stole cows, right? Yeah. Prized, like you'd say, a prized mare. Right? These are words that are used to describe, specifically female animals that are used for reproduction. So it's very obvious here with the language. And when I first saw this, it all went over my head. I hadn't yet started my PhD degree, which is a lot more focused on feminist analysis. And so I was not ready for these kinds of tropes. But I think definitely during this rewatch, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, it was just right there. And at first, I just watched, I was like, oh, gross. What's up with those machines? And they're being milked. And it's just like literally milked like cows. It also made me think of the dairy industry, where you just have cows in these cages standing there being milked, right? And it's industrialist. It also has a lot of I wish Jolie were here to talk about the capitalist implications of a lot of this, right? But it's about kind of taking resources from people.
Yeah, I will admit that when I first saw the film, because obviously there's a point to doing on all this stuff, but when you're going to watch a movie and you're not prepared for certain things, and just the scene cut to a row of women just being milked.
Yeah.
It's like, that's weird.
Yeah. And that's really as far as I went the first time I saw it, was that's weird. This is a weird movie. I mean that in a good way. I love weird movies. But it was just, it does kind of hit you strangely, and you're not sure what's going on about these breeders. Like, until you see the women, they don't feel real. But we do have their kind of leftovers of their presence by them writing on the walls, right? And I just love that one where they say, "We are not things," right? And like you said, John, oh, they took stuff, right? It's possessions, and we'll talk a little bit more as we get further along in the movie about him considering them as property, as things.
Yeah. Yeah, Jess.
Right? Like we could definitely see from the women when we do meet them, very, very skinny. They were probably given just not, they weren't getting to eat like, hamburgers and fries, that's for sure.
But even so, it's like one of the women, and I actually do want to go through for a second, and because these names are just, there's something else. We have the most prized of the wives. Her name is the Splendid Angharad, played by Rosie Huntington Whiteley, who is the one who is a month away from giving birth. Then you have Capable, played by Riley Keough. I know I'm butchering that. She's the one with the red hair. Toast the Knowing, played by Zoe Kravitz.
Toast? Like toast for my breakfast?
Yeah.
Cool.
The Dag, played by Abby Lee. She's the one who seems to, be the sort of most willing to, just yell out things at Immortan Joe when they're catching up to him. And she's one who's also pregnant. And then Cheeto the Fragile. That's right, Cheeto.
Is that the one that keeps trying to go back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Played by Courtney Eaton. And I wanted to run through those because Cheeto is the one who, as you say, tries to run back. And what she says is, we were his treasures. He gave us the high life. What's wrong with that? And the fact that, that's obviously something with being a victim and thinking
Stockholm
that
syndrome. Yeah.
But it just goes to show that compared to how everyone else in that community sort of suffers under the yoke, that she actually thinks that she gets the high life.
Yes. And that is common in cults. They will take, especially if it's led by a very horny male, they will have specific women. Jim Jones did this in Jonestown, that get to sleep with him, and they are elevated within the cult, right? And that's a way to pit, people within the cult against each other, right? By putting them off into tears. And so she has obviously internalized a lot of the Cheeto, which makes me want Cheetos. I'm sorry, but it makes me a little hungry. Anyway, it makes she's really a great sign of this cult mentality of, we're taken care of by our, by the fatherly figure. And we're given a good life, and look how the other people suffer, right? We see the kind of common people in the very beginning who are wanting little bits of water, right? She's basically saying, at least that's not us, right? And that's exactly what Immortan Joe wants. He wants them to go, at least we don't have it that bad. Very, very common tactic in cults. Also a very common tactic when it comes to race relations, like in when we're talking about South and in the Jim Crow South, there was this idea of you were a poor white, but at least you weren't black. I mean, it was very common to pit people against each other this way so that they would not come together and rise up, right? It was a way to stop rebellion.
Aaron, excellent point. Yeah, you picked up on exactly what the case was, because I've actually read up on that, and that's exactly what was going on, that she scarred herself.
She's the only one with a facial marking. All of the rest of the women are not. So this is a way to try and repel, right, his sexual advances. That was a very good point, Aaron.
Now, I want to talk for a second about our introduction to Furiosa, because she is so freaking badass the way we're introduced to her. Let me bring up some of these early images. I mean, when we first see her, I'm showing this one again where, she's getting ready to go on, supposedly on the trip to Gastown and the Bullet Farm.
And is that grease on her forehead, by the way, John? I was going to ask you that.
Yes,
okay.
it is.
So also,
I'm going to talk about how that, because there's some cool stuff related to that I want to make some observations on as the film goes on. So we get this very sort of iconic look for her. And it starts off, we see her walking away from the camera and we see the skull on her neck, which has been seared into her like it presumably is with everybody.
Yeah.
Because they even try to do that to Max.
Yeah.
Before he,
and that's the brand of, of Immortan Joe. And this, also my friend Jenna in the chat, hey Jenna, she also mentioned earlier about this kind of NXIVM cult where they would brand Keith Raniere's initials on women. And this is very similar branding on men and women, right? This kind of stuff. Bye, AK, love you.
Bye, AK, thanks for coming.
But right, so this idea of branding, right? You're saying you're my property. Once again, cattle, right? Dehumanizing and making people property. And like you said, they tried to do that to Max as well. Yeah,
but I definitely want to touch on the oil grease that's used. And just the way she looks in those opening scenes. And like I said, minimal dialogue. She doesn't utter a word until she has to. And we get those shots of her driving the war rig. And I'm just going to put up the pictures because they speak for themselves. She's not saying anything. We got the tempo of the music. We got her driving. And just from her eyes, we know she's up to something. She's planning something. We don't exactly know what it is yet.
And she keeps looking in her rearview mirror, right?
Yeah.
That's also a sign that she's kind of nervous, right?
And there's this great shot where she just kind of lightly looks outside the car, and her eyes do this kind of flicker from one, like she's looking ahead, and then they move off to the side. And there's just something so amazing about that. The way that George Miller shot this and just lets her eyes do the talking, basically. We get to know her before she utters a single word. And she's just fascinating to watch.
And her light eyes really contrast with that dark grease on her forehead. So, and kind of the under her eyes too. So, or, under her bottom eyelid. So we really get this emphasis of the emotion. And Charlize is really good at this, putting that emotion in her eyes. She's very talented.
Yeah. Which this seems like a moment just to say, like,
first after Charlize. Oh, sorry. I was ready.
Well, I wasn't going to, but Aaron's
thank you. Yes.
Aaron's going there. But no, I was going to say, this is such an iconic performance. I think I really feel like Furiosa almost immediately jumped up to the levels of Ripley from Alien. And I think that's a large part of why this movie was so immediately considered like a classic right out of the gate. Not a lot of movies can achieve that, but I feel like this one did, just because she's so amazing in it. And you don't want to mess with her. You want to cheer her on. And and
especially when you find out that she's protecting other women, and like we've talked about at the beginning, she too was, I know, hey, I saw Atomic Blonde 3 times in theaters for the plot. Okay, let me just be very clear. When you find out that she has a mission to protect these women, you think in the beginning her mission is to go get gas and come back like a good servant, right? But then when you find out she's going off books and she is trying to protect women and protect their own bodily autonomy, I mean, what better goal is there, right? And, presumably also to protect their future children so they won't turn into warlords, just as they said in the writing, we don't want our children to become warlords, right? So it's also protecting future life, which is why it's really Furiosa's compassion that drives her, and not necessarily. I think Aaron, I think it was Aaron said this earlier, that in the chat, that it's not just that she wants to get back at Immortan Joe. That is some of it, but she also has compassion for these women, and she wants this vicious cycle of sexual violence to stop.
Yeah, I do think there's an element to play of both, and I think as the film progresses, she becomes much more concerned with the former than the latter. Okay, so I've just realized that we're about 50 minutes in, and we're still at the beginning of the film.
All right, keep moving.
So this is going great. Okay.
I mean, to be fair, there is a little bit of time, just a little in the film, where it's mostly just cars blowing up. So, we got to get that plotted first, and then we'll get to the cars blowing up.
Okay, so
yeah. she's turning away from Gastown, and they're going.
Here's the thing. I was about to go back and talk about some stuff before this, but I'm like, no, let's just charge ahead.
Let's charge ahead on the Fury Road. Keep going straight. Let's do it. So she veers east, and she's going, and she tells him, hey, these are the orders. We keep going, right? And then Immortan Joe realizes that she's taken his prized possessions, and he sends his war boys after her, right? So they have now pursuers on the road. And
Nux is pretty much at death's door. He's getting transfusions from Max, the blood bag, but he's going to go out there. This is his moment. If he's going to die, as he says, he's going to die historic on the Fury Road. So he's like, hitch up my blood bag to the car. And so they head out. And I want to mention this because I think it's tragic, because it is that hero worship of this horrible dictator, but it is also kind of funny in the moment where he and Slick are, like, Immortan, and Joe glances out the window, and Nux is like, he looked straight at me. He looked in the eye, and the other guy is like, he was scanning the horizon.
Yeah, so we have Immortan Joe and his entourage, and I just got to say, someone, in the chat knows the electric guitar player. This is ridiculous in so many ways. Entourage. There's literally a guy who is like strapped to, thank you, that's exactly what I needed, strapped to this huge thing of speakers, like electric guitar playing, like, I mean, what is more metal than this? This is the war, party that is going after them. And this is her in a big war rig, and then she has like 3 or 4 other cars with her. And this is what they send after them. I mean, just throwing everything at them, right? They have these huge crazy cars that are insane going after them. And I mean, the guitar, like, when I first saw that, I thought that was when I started liking this movie. I thought, okay, it's leaning into the ridiculousness, and so am I.
And the fact that this guy just keeps playing for the entire film.
Yes, that is his job. Leaf actually has a good question that I thought about, which is is it Nux, the war boy that ends up kind of joining Furiosa? Did you say it was Nux?
Yeah.
So he puts Max, his blood bag, in the front, and Lady Leaf is right. Why would you do that? You can hardly see. Like, maybe so you could keep an eye on him, because if he was in the back, he might escape. I'm not sure. Yeah, there he is. I mean, wow. How are you supposed to? This is definitely not to driving, visual standards. How are you going to be able to see the road?
I mean, it just looks cool.
It does look cool. That is true.
The rule of cool.
The rule of cool. Okay. It could just be because in the back he could be working on trying to get his restraints off, and they want to keep an eye on him. I don't know, but it also is the rule of cool, totally.
And also, I wonder if it has something to do with making Max's blood pump faster.
Oh, that's a good idea. Got to get the blood flowing. So so this is they're pursuing them with this crazy party, this crazy entourage. And as they're doing that, aren't they then pursued by these things called buzzards as well?
Yeah, the buzzards.
So then they have and they have all these spikes. They look like pork pines. So it's like also coming after them. So you have these, I mean, like the odds are really against Furiosa, right, and her mission, because there's
all these
huge parties coming after them.
I'm going to talk about this because there's a whole bunch of like quick cuts, and things like sawing into the war rig, and just again, there's this awesome shot of Furiosa where one of the things like buzzing into the side of the rig, and it just cuts to her, and she quickly like turns toward the camera. Another like iconic shot. Honestly, I'm just gonna keep talking about all the shots where it just showcases Charlize because she looked so badass in the movie.
I mean, you bring that cinematography knowledge. I love it.
Yeah, the editing, the camera work, the tempo of the scene, just the rhythm of everything.
And lots of really good flyover shots where you see how large. It's very shock and awe, and very kind of like you really get an idea for how large, right, this opposing party is. And then you've got these buzzards, and and actually, if I remember correctly, and I can't believe I'm saying that because I just watched it a couple days ago, but didn't the war party that was going after them help them defeat the buzzards, right? Because they wanted to get the war rig back.
Yeah. Sorry, hold on.
Are you looking for your he has like a bajillion pictures for this stream, by the way. So you're just like staring into Charlize's eyes and get lost. I do that too.
Yeah, no, but I wanted to bring up this picture because there's this great moment where she just like swings outside of the rig on the door and just
she puts something on the pedal. I can't remember what she does, but she puts something on the pedal so that she can do that. And she's just hands down badass in this movie. And right now, these guys that are with her, right, that are also war boys, they think they're just being attacked by buzzards and everything. They don't really get that they're actually betraying Immortan Joe yet. So they're helping her fight.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting element, is that, so there they are destroying one of the buzzards. There we go, exploding cars. I told you people we were going to have them, right? So they're defeating these buzzards who seem a little bit like sand pirates. I don't know if that's that's kind of how I read them, is that they people that veer off the kind of the straight and narrow road, the normal road, they kind of maybe steal things from people.
Oh, Pat, thank you for joining us, man. It's great to see you.
But so we have this double attack kind of on Furiosa and her big war rig, right? The apocalypse. Yeah, the apocalypse happened, but somehow they remembered how to make amplifiers and electric guitars. I love it.
There's this great moment also, and I'm really just listing this stuff off because the camera work is so amazing. When one of the war boys, whose name is Morsov, is mortally wounded, and so he's gonna go out in a blaze of glory. So he sprays his face, which is the, shiny and chrome thing that, everybody meeting their death has to, it's silver spray paint. They have to be shiny and chrome. And, so he's like, witness me. And he launches, off of the rig, and this beautiful shot, here it is, where he just slams onto the buzzard. And big.
And he's holding basically explosive spears, kind of. Yeah. Right now, so he knows that he's not going to survive that attack. And this idea of witness me, right? It's like, see me go out to Valhalla in a blaze of glory, basically. And what a blaze it is.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the colors of this film, because just look at the sand takes on almost this orange brown color, and then you've got this just beautiful shade of blue. The whole film just has this, it's very surreal, just the way the colors are used, which is actually why I vastly prefer the original version to the black and chrome release that George Miller put out, because how are you gonna deny yourself these colors? They're just beautiful.
And I was talking about this with you, J-Dubs, before a couple days ago after I had seen it, and we were talking about the difference in color. And I said it adds to the surrealness, right? It makes it feel otherworldly, and it is its own world, right?
Yeah.
And we do know that it is post our world, right? Because they have a discussion about satellites, right? Oh, those were satellites they used to, like, you know, transmit signals, right? So we know that there are leftovers of our time, but it's brought on it's kind of taken on its own culture at this point. And so, you know, if you notice our background, we've got that beautiful blue sky, and then we've got that orangey yellow sand, and it feels like a mosaic of surrealness, you know. And I love the colors, I really do, because it in so many ways this feels like surreal, but then it also the emotions of specifically Furiosa, especially when we get to that point where they decide they need to go back, that is where we really get that human emotion.
Yeah, like I'm not going to say anything about the original Mad Max movies. One, because I've only seen the Road Warrior, and two, because I don't want anybody to come after me.
Don't at John.
Who prefers the original films. But I will say that as a new viewer who saw this film first, Fury Road is always going to be my Mad Max. Just because I feel like every element of this movie is so perfectly constructed. And George Miller actually made the whole film on storyboards years before they ever shot the film. And Tom Hardy actually said that no matter what they tried to do on set to kind of nudge it this way or that way, George always managed to sort of hunker down and get things to be exactly the way they were on, as Tom Hardy said, his little pictures.
And it feels like an artist's rendition. It feels like an artist had his, you know, easel and his colors, and he was painting it. And when you tell me about the storyboard, that's exactly what I think of, right? He was putting it together.
Thanks, Micah. So yeah, let's go ahead and keep moving on. There's this great moment when they're still dealing with the buzzards where Splendid starts to crawl out from under the hiding place, under the war rig. And she's like, we can't breathe down there. And that's sort of the first glimpse we get of the wives and Furiosa's like, stay out of sight, especially now because there's all this mayhem going around. But they do defeat the buzzards with the help of Nux and Slick and the war boys. But it's at that point that she keeps going forward towards a sandstorm. And then finally the one war boy is like, why can't you stop? And then he notices, that's when he realizes something's wrong. And then he's like, what have you done? What have you done?
Yeah, he realizes he's unknowingly become a part of a rebellion, basically, right? Yeah, because at that point they're like, okay, the buzzards are gone. Let's join our bros, that are behind us. Let's slow this down. Okay, why is the war rig still moving, right? So this is when we have a decision for these war boys that are with her, right? Do they continue on with her? And it's a kind of an identity crisis for them, right? Even though she's the boss, Immortan Joe is the father, right?
And really, they view Joe as a god, basically.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's just they're not going to go against their father figure and this idol that they hold up. So they do turn against her. But, eventually she makes it. She plunges right into the sandstorm because that's how she's going to just deal with all of them. If she can make it through that, then she'll be able to ditch everybody for a little while at least. This sequence is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, the sandstorm you have, and talk about colors. We were talking about the blue sky and the orange sand, and all of a sudden it is just orange sand and the sky disappears. And she's gonna just drive through it, right? And she has the best car out of everyone. She has this huge war rig, right? They were gonna go to get gas, and so they're very prepared for that, right? Yes, that was an amazing scene when they're driving into the sandstorm, and that really is what helps them. And it also is where we see Nooks and Mad Max, the blood bag, right, kind of driving around crazily as well. Like they have smaller cars, and it's more difficult for them to get through this insane sand, right? See, as you can see, the blue sky is just completely dwarfed and completely hidden by that orange, right? So it's also a change in mood as well. It's this all nature, right, is overtaking them.
Yeah, and Max is desperately trying to like get inside the vehicle. And meanwhile, Nux is like sabotaging himself, where he's, getting this flare out. He's, letting like all the oil or the gasoline leak into the car. And he's like, "Witness me, blood bag, witness me." And he's just ready to go out into a blaze of glory.
Oh my God, Jess, I'm sorry. Jess has a great comment. Orange juice tidal wave.
Nice. I'm going to drink to that.
Cheers. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, John, but I just love that. Oh, with pulp.
Yeah, the music. I haven't mentioned the music.
Oh, how have you not mentioned the music yet, John?
Well, especially because there's a moment coming up right after the scene where I would have mentioned the music, absolutely. But what's great about the music in the scene is this is really Nuts' heroic music, which is funny because we're not really rooting for him yet, because he's trying to do harm to the characters that we are rooting for. But already the film is planting the seeds that this is someone who we should actually feel compassion towards. And so he's got this big sort of epic sweeping theme, and it just adds another level of surrealness to, with all this stuff going on, cars are going flying up into the air and exploding. And then he's got his big, this is such a quotable movie. So I'm just going to go ahead with the lines. He's like, "I live, I die, I live again." And then he says, "Oh, what a day, what a lovely day," which is like the quintessential line of the film.
Yes, and it goes back to this death cult, right? Going into your death with enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
And they believe they will have another life in Valhalla. They don't think that death is the end. So that is a part of these cultish teachings that Immortan Joe has instilled in them. And it's also just a great line.
But yeah, so Max does kind of smash his way through the car, and in the whole tussle, the car actually spins out, and what is another great shot is the what do you call it? The flare flies out of the car and lays out on the sand, and the light goes out and the scene just fades to black with it, and the music, which is so hectic and loud, just completely quiets down. And it's that first moment you really have to breathe as an audience member.
Seriously, because until then it's just been straight up, and this movie is mostly car chase, but this is the first breather that you really get in the movie.
Yeah, they're few and far between, because it's like, enjoy this moment that you have, because it's going to pick up again.
Get a lot more. Which maybe this is a good time for the mid-roll, John. Now that we're saying there's a bit of a time to breathe, maybe we can breathe and do a little bit of that.
This was not the time to breathe that I anticipated yet. Mid-roll, because there's another one, but we're not there yet. Yeah, Stephen, that took longer than I anticipated. Us too. This is going to be dangerous. Because I
next year stream 7 hours. I'm prepared.
I foresee a lot of our streams going this way. Yeah. So let's stop and do the mid roll. Once again, I want to say, if you've enjoyed any of what you've seen, and even if you haven't, hit the subscribe button. Click in the corner on the logo, and definitely, because we're going to be doing lots and lots of stuff in weeks to come. Next week, we're actually going to be covering for Halloween the 2001 film The Others. So make sure you tune in for that. Aemy, you got like big stuff going on your own channel. Let's talk about it.
Yes, and I want to say, as a pull for The Others, that is my favorite horror film, and I will be in costume since it will be Halloween, so please come for that. I will be dressed up as my favorite DC character, so that will be very fun. So I have a lot coming up on my blog and channel, John. I'm so glad that I get this little bit of time to tell you all about it. I just posted an amazing video. All of you that are in the Song of Ice and Fire fandom, I had Crowfood's daughter and Archmaester Emma on to talk about an essay that I wrote with Jolie, aka All Hail the Night's Queen. So I had all three of them on to talk about the Shade of the Evening Trees and the Hammer of the Waters. And that was very, very fun. And so please check that out in my channel. I have a lot coming up. I have my first His Dark Materials essay about Orientalism in the series. I study Chinese literature. It's my thing. So I'm going to be talking about that. And I also am going to have Lo on the channel, and we are going to talk about Lyso No Mar. And then I'm going to have my favorite Cersei stan in the whole world, Rohan, coming on to talk about Cersei and her parallels to the last Empress of China. I also am going to have my co-author from a Dark Star essay that we wrote together, and we're going to come talk about this a little bit more. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you watched it. We worked hard on that, and I think all four of us are some pretty, obviously Archmaester Emma and Crowfood's daughter have been at this a lot longer than me and Jolie, and we were just so thrilled that they agreed to come on. So those are all the things that I have coming up. So if you want to read, you can read the blog, but my videos, I read the essays to you audiobook style, and then I have a panel talk about it with me. So you get a little bit extra discussion in the videos. So I will stop that there, but I am Aemy Blackfyre, and I am here to talk about non-Western symbolism in A Song of Ice and Fire, His Dark Materials, and more. I have some Poppy War essays coming up, so that is very exciting. And all the plugs are over, I promise. Like, subscribe, all the YouTube things.
You can find all of her links both in the description of this video and also on our YouTube channel. If you go to the About section, I've got links not only for her stuff, but also for all of our Knights of Kira pages, which you should definitely check out.
And if you follow me on Twitter, I am Aemy Poller, Poller. I love polls. I will poll you what you think about His Dark Materials, Song of Ice and Fire, and more. I inject your poll feedback directly into my veins. It is my drug.
If you are not following her on Twitter, you have to change that, because if you're a fan of the channel, then you just have no choice. All right. You have to. So, okay. I also do want to mention that tomorrow I will be appearing, as usual, on Here Be Dragons with my co-host Steven Stark, and we're going to be talking about the film The Crow, which I've never seen before. So I haven't actually had time to watch yet, so I got to do that tonight or tomorrow.
Also, did you want to plug that big interview you've got coming up, John, on the channel, where I will get a Saturday off, but I will still be watching. But
thank you for reminding me. See,
that's what co-hosts are for.
This is why it's so great you're here, and a myriad of other reasons. Yeah, guys, I announced this last week on Here Be Dragons, but if you didn't get a chance to hear, next month, tentatively on the 21st of November, I will be conducting an interview with an author named Doug Adams. No, that's not the Doug Adams who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This Doug Adams is the wonderful guy who wrote the book, The Music of the Lord of the Rings films. And he has worked close to Howard Shore for a number of years. He's done stuff for the Hobbit soundtracks, the Lord of the Rings live to projection concerts that they've had all over the world. So I'm like super psyched to be able to talk with him. And if you have questions, like certain somebody I know does, send them my way, and I'll ask him. I am going to try and maybe get a little tidbit about his upcoming Music of the Hobbit films book, but I'm guessing he's not going to give an exclusive to me, but I'll try anyway. So yeah, make sure you stay tuned for that. That's coming next month. All right.
Back
I
to
think
the
we're
movie.
through everything. So let's go back into Mad Max, which we are not nearly halfway through yet.
So can I just say one thing quickly about what we get the scene where they're stopped, John, because it's literally a 2-second thing and then they move on. But we have the women finally emerge from the war rig. They get kind of a breather, right? And so you have them drinking water, right? And you have a woman take something off and throw it down. And this is a chastity belt. Now, chastity belts basically were to put around women, and a certain man, in this case, Immortan Joe, has the key so that if any man tried to rape her other than Immortan Joe, right, they couldn't. And chastity belts, ding, 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 are a huge example of the patriarchy because it's, I have sole sexual, dominance over you, and I don't want any man getting to you because this is a very natalist thing in feminist analysis. They want to Immortan Joe wants to make sure any children that come from these women are his and his alone. And her removing that chastity belt is a sign of removing the patriarchy. Thank you. This has been my TED Talk.
And let's mention how that chastity belt looks. Like it's got like
his teeth,
like you can guess where.
Which goes back to something that Freud talked about, which is this idea of the female parts consuming the man and his fear of being consumed during sex, this kind of succubus kind of thing. And it's also, as John said, just kind of gross and disgusting. And I'm guessing as a man, John, you probably kind of, ooh, no thank you when you saw that. I mean, as a woman, I was like, no, thank you. But especially as a man, be like, okay, I'm not touching her. And that's exactly the point of that type of chastity belt.
And the scene starts, this is just such a brilliantly executed moment because Max basically comes up upon them. But in the build up to that moment, you get Furiosa, who's like knocking the dirt off of the war rig. And so you got that pounding noise, and then it cuts to Max carrying Nux, who's attached to him by chain. And as we
and not this chain, but this blood, this connection of blood, right?
Yeah, and well, actually, in the scene before, he actually disconnects it, and that's a pretty cool moment because you can hear the blood pumping, but as soon as he pulls it out, it stops, and
Great use of sound.
You can see the relief on him. Yeah, sound is so key, especially in this scene, because you got the sound of Furiosa knocking the sand off the war rig, and then that pounding noise morphs into the score. That's like that boom, boom, boom as Max is walking towards them. And it's just a brilliant use of, matching up sound effects with the music. But then he comes upon them, and he finds this just vision that is like the last thing he's probably expecting, which are basically these angels in the desert.
And they are wearing white specifically, right? We're going back to color. Also, can you put up Micah's comment about Zeus and Robert Baratheon? Two very horny men. And we have a saying over at the Unspun Yarn with Nessie, which is Zeus is a hoe. I'm sorry, Mike always has these great one-liners. Yeah, it's very much an expression of male anxiety when it comes to kind of sexual dominance over a certain woman and making sure no other guys are there. But I just love that because remember, Zeus is a hoe. That's all I have to say.
There really are a lot of things with the scene that I want to talk about, and you know what? However long it takes, I don't care. You really see how much of a primal animal Max still is at this point. Well, both the way he actually is, but also the way they view him, because they're obviously, this is a very tense, scary moment for them because they think they're in the clear and they see this guy who just looks like an animal and coming up upon them, and he's barely spoken. So at this point, he's like, he wants water. He's like, water.
And he's muzzled like a wild animal, right?
And then he holds up the chain, he's like, chain, basically for them to.
Very one word, responses.
But
and we as the viewer know that saw gun is misfiring. So, but the women don't know that.
Which was a great moment when we first saw that. That's actually a callback to the Road Warrior, because a moment exactly like that happens with the gun where it misfires. So that is a direct homage to Road Warrior. And what I also like, we see the wives, and Splendid immediately is like, we're not going back. Which I love. It's just, they've come this far. There's nothing stopping them. And there's this great shot where I think the whole scene kind of looks like a mirage because we're getting it from Max's point of view. And I really like that even though we see the wives in full view, we don't really notice that Splendid is pregnant until there's that great shot of her walking forward and the camera pans down.
Yeah.
And
it's also because they're wet, her clothes are stuck to it. So you see even the protruding belly button, right? Mm-hmm. So she's very pregnant. Like she's about to drop. She's, I think, pretty much 8 months pregnant. So it's very dramatic.
Yeah, and we did mention the scars on her face, which become apparent. We can see them very clearly, and that right away informs her character. We know we can see into, because we see her determination with her saying they're not going back. We see the scars on her face, so she knows what she's done to rebel against Joe. And then there's a moment where Max wants the chain removed, and so he has one of the wives start to do that. And then there's this line that the dad says, which I love, and I hate referring to them by these names because they're such horrible names. But she says, "And Herod, is that just the wind, or is that a furious vexation?" And it's because we can hear the Doof Warrior playing in the background with the guitar, and the noise is getting louder.
And we have the drums too.
Yeah.
In addition to that, so it's full band, fun band of.
So we can hear them off in the distance. So time is of the essence. It's like something's got to happen real quick. But as he's distracted by one of the wives trying to get the chain off, Furiosa just charges him. And like, this is so awesome. Because Furiosa at one point even, and this is like a sign of pure badassery, she even hits him at one point with the stump of her arm, which, is missing. Like, this is an incredible woman, because like...
Yeah, she's like Ed from Full Metal Alchemist. She's got like a mechanical arm and it fell off. And so she's like, just use the stump of my arm then. It's just, she's going to use all means, like barehanded, literally one hand, to like, she's just, and she just, when she sees that she needs to do something, she does it. She is so amazing in this movie.
Yeah, she's basically using anything at her disposal, because there's that moment where like he's using the door to guard against, she's taking like a wrench or something and just pounding after him, and just the motion in the scene, like they keep going, and then Nux is being pulled along, and then he wakes up because he's being dragged as the fight goes on. And I like that the wives are part of this. They're constantly trying to pull Max back by...
Yeah, they're using his chain once again, kind of improvising with what they have.
Yeah, and then there's another moment where Furiosa basically takes the hose and starts hitting Max back and forth, which is great. And the scene really doesn't let up until, first Max tries to go for the gun,
They both reach for the gun, sorry, Chicago reference.
And the scene doesn't really stop until Max gets hold of the gun. Nux is awake. He holds up the cartridge, and Max slams it down and then fires the gun off 3 times to kind of say, okay, that's enough. But what's cool about this scene, because we mentioned the oil grease on her face, like throughout this scene, because they're tussling around in the dirt, the grease is coming off bit by bit, but it's very natural. This is an ingenious way so that when we get to the end of the fight, when Furiosa has to actually like have, the first conversation, that she's having in the film, we get to see Charlize's face, and so she gets to give a full performance. So I thought that was very crafty of George Miller to stage it that way, so that by the time the fight is over, we can actually see her face more clearly.
But he gets the better of them, does he not? And he gets in the war rig and tries to drive off, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, tries to. But guess what? Furiosa, not only is she amazing at fighting, she's also has the smart brain ideas, right? She's smart, and she has set a kill switch so that not just anyone can drive that war rig. You have to do a certain switches and buttons in a certain way. And Mad Max does not know that. So he's like, oh yeah, I did it. Woo! Going off into the desert with this big war rig. And he gets like 200 feet or something and then just stops. Yeah. And then she goes up to him and is like, kill switch. I know the combination. So only I can drive. And this is where we really get Furiosa's, we really realize that not only is she compassionate, not only is she an amazing fighter, but she is also extremely intelligent. And she has planned for anything that could go wrong and made alternative plans, right, to make sure that she doesn't get screwed over, basically. And so, you know, Max thought he had gotten away, but that was not the case. So he's not going anywhere without her, and she's not going anywhere without the wives. And I hate using that term because they are not married to him in a consensual way. They are used in in very, very unconsensual sexual violence ways. So I hate using the term wives. I also hate using the term breeders. So I really don't know what to call them.
Let's just call them the girls.
The women. Hey, come on, they're women. The women. So the women.
That also sounds kind of like they're the women.
The women. Well, they have insane names. Like I'm not going to Cheeto.
Yeah.
Capable. Anyway, so that's the point, is that he's not going anywhere without her. She's not going anywhere without the women. So they're all going to have to get together as one happy family for the rest of the movie, basically.
And that's the thing. Like first of all, there's no trust at this stage.
Yeah.
But there is going to have to be trust. It's going to be trust of necessity. Trust to get through this so they never have to see each other again, basically.
Yeah. That's basically, at first it's very utilitarian. They're a cooperation.
And Furiosa does have this great line before they catch up with Max where, you know, the war rig starts driving and she goes over to Angharad and says, you know, how does it feel? And she's like, it hurts. And she says, out here, everything hurts. You want to get through this? Do as I say. Now pick up what you can and run. It's just great. Like, I'm sorry, everything she says in this movie is just badass.
Yeah, and her dialogue is used quite sparingly, especially in the beginning. And that's what makes it, I think, more impactful.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they're all one big happy family, and this war rig headed that way, right? And we're going to come up.
Well, can I
go ahead.
I do want to break down that moment, because with her basically convincing him to that they need to move forward together, basically they need to be let back on the war rig, and she's probably being charitable, because at this point, like, if he doesn't agree to it, she's gonna be taking him out.
He needs her, she does not need him. So at this point, it's, you know, if he comes along, great. If not, she's going to keep doing. She has a mission, and she is determined. Yeah,
she says, you're relying on the gratitude of a very bad man. You've already damaged one of his wives. And because Max actually fired off the gun at Angharad, and she's just bleeding, you know, a bit off the leg, but that's pretty much his death sentence right there. And Furiosa knows that, and she's using that. But even that doesn't really sway him. But she says, you want that thing off your face? That doesn't.
Yes.
And then Max's theme comes in at that moment, which again is the pounding music. And I think that the composer chose that for Max because he is, as I said, he's like an animal through most of this film until he gets his voice back. And he finds a bit about himself, you know, he finds that redemption that he's sorely needing. And so just that music propels into, you know, they're moving forward. Uh, and then, yeah, okay, that's what I wanted to say about that. Go ahead, Amy.
So I was just saying, then now we're coming on to another part of the movie, which is important, which is where there's kind of this passageway, right? And she mentions that she's made a deal. She doesn't know if it's still going to stick with the people there to kind of give them something in exchange for safe passage. We don't know what it is yet until she gets there. But if you notice, so they're going to this passage and there are these guys on it's a very tense moment. There are these guys on motorcycles and they stop, and she stops the rig and she gets out. Yes, and that's absolutely true. It's also her death sentence that one of the I hate to use the term wives, one of the wives has been damaged, right? And so anyway, so he says, you promised us gas and you said that you wouldn't have that many pursuers. I see 3 war parties behind you, right? And she's like, well, things kind of got out of hand or whatever, kind of under her breath. And she's like, okay, so got this gas here. Let's get this going. And she has this code word that she's going to yell to tell Max to go. And she doesn't know his name's Max. So she says, okay, you won't tell me your name. I'm going to yell fool. And she teaches him the sequence to start the rig. So she shows a little bit of trust at this point, enough to let him go and start the war rig without her. So she teaches Max that. And she says, okay, I don't know your name. So if I yell fool, you need to do this sequence and you need to drive and get these women out of here, right? And she can tell it's going to go south. And so she yells, fool, which is one of my favorite parts of the movie. And so he does all the things and he starts it going, and she's kind of using the war rig as a shield, and there's a lot more shooting, and this is an action movie, so there's a lot going on right here. And so the guys that are on the motorcycle don't want these pursuers to fall upon them, right? There's not that many of them. So they intentionally collapse the pass, and there's just a lot of explosions. And it's a really exciting time. This is actually my favorite scene in the movie. My second favorite scene we'll talk about later. But this, where in that explosion of, they think that they're going to cut them off, right? And I just want to say, there's a really interesting line that I really like in this. And that is that, oh gosh, that's later. Never mind. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I mean, this is just insane because you get the biker gang basically, they're
and they have these like I don't know, tendrils, like this cloth kind of hanging from them in strips, kind of, and it's really interesting because you have the buzzards had this spiky distinctiveness, and these people at the pass have this like kind of tendril distinctive kind of style going on.
Yeah, and they're armed with these explosives, but they're riding their bikes and they're like, flying over top of the war rig and dropping the explosives down and stuff. And this leads to one of the moments that I think is so cool, which is at one point the rig is on fire, and they actually use the front of the rig, the thing that lowers down, to basically blow the all the dirt back onto the rig to extinguish the fire. So the rig is basically able to protect itself against explosions and stuff. And there's music going over this whole scene that is like this propulsive building and this, sort of heroic music as Max and Furiosa are basically fending off all these bikers. And there's this great moment where she's out of ammunition, so she gives the gun to Splendid, who doesn't know what to do with it, and then
is it Capable that's the one that takes it?
I think it's let me go back up to the cast list because it's Toast, the one played by Zoe Kravitz, who takes it, and she immediately knows what to do.
Yeah.
And so she reloads the gun. Now, while this is going on, Joe has made it through the pass, and he's got Nux with him, who, says he was on the war rig, so he goes with him. So they're in pursuit. there's this great moment where Nuts says, you know, there's a way inside. I can take care of this for you. And it's like almost this moment where you feel his excitement in this moment, but it's like so horrible because it's like, dude, you should not look up to this guy.
But for him, it's like the cult leader finally recognizes me, right?
Yeah, the exchanges.
It's reassuring.
Yeah, I want to read it off. Okay, so he says, Joe says, put a bullet in her head, stop the rig, return my treasures to me, and I myself will carry you to the gates of Valhalla. And then Nut says, am I awaited? And he says, you will ride eternal, shiny, and chrome. It's like,
and that goes back to the spring, you know, the chrome on there. And I think that's also a reference to the cars, right? And a reference to the road, right? You keep riding and you keep driving into your death, basically.
Yeah. But then, of course, poor Nutsy stumbles almost immediately, loses the gun, and falls flat on his face. And this brings up something that I didn't mention earlier, something that the War Boys get from Joe, but they don't realize what it means, is the word mediocre. And they chant it as like when they've done something great. And when one of them has done something great, they shout, mediocre. And of course, Joe says it, but it's an insult, obviously. But that just completely goes over their heads. So it's like one of their battle cries. That's so sad.
That reminds me actually of a saying from Wine and Crime, a great podcast, where they say there's nothing like the confidence of a mediocre white man. Then they are literally having the confidence of a mediocre white man. Wine and Crime. Ad. Hashtag ad. I'm just kidding. They don't pay us, but that's a great podcast. Yeah, no, it's exactly that. They have such confidence in their leader that they make fools of themselves, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But some of my favorite lines are coming up, but let's keep talking about the action at the pass.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's just there's this one moment where, you know, after that, where Joe drives, you know, his vehicle and goes like, you know, flying through the air, trying to crash into the rig, which is really awesome. But it all builds to this moment where they're, you know, pulling up close to them, and Splendid opens up the car door to stand out there, and the music kind of sort of stops at the moment. It's a great cut, and to basically stop Joe from shooting Furiosa.
Yeah.
And it's just this great moment of defiance. Unfortunately, she pays for that moment because she ends up, when the rig, crashes into, some of the rock, and she almost falls off. And there's this moment where Max looks back concerned, and he gives her like a thumbs up, like, good job. But then it's followed where she slips, and then it's this horrifying moment where she falls. Go ahead. And
it's just my favorite line, and we skipped over it, so I just want to go back. When she does that and she opens it, and all you see is this huge pregnant belly. And my favorite line of the whole movie is, "That's my child, my property." And that's Immortan Joe saying that. Now, when he says, "That's my child, my property," he's not just talking about the child, he's talking about the woman. Once again, she is a thing, she is a possession. And before that scene, we also had one of his entourage saying, all of this for a family squabble, for healthy babies, right? And it's like, that's kind of how you feel as well. It's like all this because this guy doesn't want to give up these women, right? And he has this patriarchal control over them that he just can't give up, right? That's my property. That's my baby. And I have more to say later when he tries to find out the sex of the baby and is obsessed about it being a certain sex. I wonder which one that is. But he's obsessed with keeping them as possessions, and he can't have them hurt. And I'm going to go ahead and give that a little drink too. Cheers. But yeah, so that's he sees them as his property, and it's not about hurting his child or hurting this woman. Yes, trying. It's also about keeping his property intact, right? It would be like one of your DVDs, right? You're afraid that one of your DVDs will get, Blu-rays also will get scratched or damaged. You'd be like, oh no, that's my property, right? That's fine because that's actually a thing. I'm sorry, don't joke about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Look, he's already sweating just thinking about it. Right? But that's your property and you don't want to get damaged. These are people. This is a real person and a future real person. But he doesn't see it that way. He sees them as property, right? And so that's why that's one of my favorite lines, is that's my child, my property. And property here, I think he's using in the plural, not the singular. He's not talking about just the child. He's also talking about the woman. But as you were saying, John, she slips, right? And that's just a devastating, devastating scene in this movie.
Yeah.
I'm also going to drink for physical media.
I'm all out of orange juice. I have to go over to the water now. Oh no! I hope the whole thing.
That's why I got a big glass.
The whole thing's gonna go off the rails now.
Oh no! If you don't have orange juice, then what can you
do? But actually, now that you mention that about the plural meaning, even him saying that's my child could be taken as plural, which adds a whole nother level to. Ugh.
Here, I'm taking it and I'm throwing it away. Yeah. Don't want to talk about that. Don't want to think about that.
Flashbacks of, basically Craster.
Oh my God. I was just thinking the same thing. Yes. Yeah. Because he's the father figure. Okay. I'm moving on. I can't.
And then Max basically sees it and he says she went under the wheel. And they're all like, stop and go back. And he's like, there's no point. She went under the wheel. He keeps saying. And Furiosa is basically like, did you see it? She needs to know. And then we cut back to, Joe, screaming in quote unquote agony, we'll say.
Yes.
And what's
when he's holding her, right? And it's not agony because of he lost his wife and child. Yeah. It's because, oh no, here's my breeding stock and my calf that is dead, right? It's loss of property for him. It's not loss of life, which is how we as the audience hopefully see it.
Yeah. And
sorry, Stephen is like, can you imagine having sex with Immortan Joe? And now the chat is just like, nope.
Stephen, no, I'm not putting any of it.
No, we're not putting. I have to mute. Hold on. Don't leave me alone with that. I'm not leaving you alone. I'm back. So we see him holding her in agony, but it's not agony. It's loss in the sense of losing property and not people.
What's really good, though, from a visual standpoint of that moment is that, and I feel like we haven't really put up a great picture of Immortan Joe. So
do we have to? Like, is that necessary?
I'm going to. This is from the beginning of the film, just so you can get an idea of like the teeth.
Yeah. So you're just having a good day, hanging out with your sisters, your fellow breeders, and that guy comes in for a nice steamy night with you. Ooh, put on some Barry White. Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's just a charmer, right?
Oh my God. Ladies,
so the reason why I put this up is because when he's holding her and he's basically screaming, like those teeth are opened up and we see his actual teeth and they're completely bloody, which just I didn't really notice that on my first viewing. It's one of those things that you notice afterwards. And it's like, of course, this guy's teeth are bleeding.
Right.
But yeah.
Maybe he's got a nice butt. I don't know. There might be one redeeming quality. Yeah, instead of thirst, it's like dehydration. I've got dehydration when I do that. Yeah, no, thank you.
But it does create this, this whole interesting idea of these warlords who, look like, they have the most unappealing sort of looks, and he's basically a monster, but he's able to assert so much control over
that psychological cultist control, and he does it through controlling the resources, but he also does it through this ideology. And the scene directly after this, right, we have that one, I believe it's Cheeto, correct? We already talked about this, who is more likely to go back, and she's running back, and some of it is for her fellow kind of sister, I guess you could call them, but it's also to run back to him. She thinks, this is comfort. I want this. He's just right there. I'm going to go get him. And one of the women holds him back and says one of my favorite lines. It says, "We are not things," right? And she's kind of, you have this kind of sense that the pregnant woman, I'm so sorry, I keep forgetting her name, who had fallen, was their leader and was the one who convinced them that they need to leave. And this woman who's holding her back saying, "We are not things," is quoting her. And that's a way of honoring her, right? And this is, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but this is a really good scene because it's saying, look, she told us we can be free. Just because, she's now most likely dead, that doesn't mean that we can't still be free and keep her spirit going, right? And going back to the "we are not things," which one of the things that they wrote on the wall, right? And remembering that we can have a better future separate from Immortan Joe.
And since I didn't put this up when we were talking about it, but I do want to put up the shot of Splendid defiantly opening that door, just because it's such a great moment. And I like that,
and look at her face, the defiance in her face, saying, "I dare you to shoot me," right?
Yeah. It's just, they're all so strong, and it's just, I mean, sorry, I just said that cliche thing of, oh, strong women, which all women are strong.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, but just the movie's called Fury Road, I think, for a reason. You just see the fury in these women.
And the indignation, especially the woman with the red hair, she's looking and she's supporting her sister, right? And I call them sisters. I mean, they're sisters in their situation, right? And it's just such a powerful moment, and it's showing, okay, we're your property and you don't want to lose us. We're going to put our neck out there and see if you are, going to shoot us or not, because we are willing to, it's this idea of, we want to live free. We would rather live free, right? Or we will never, if we're going to be slaves, then we're going to die, right? Yeah. And she's putting that directly out there.
Now, and this is cracking me up, because this is like the next quiet moment where things settle down. This is where the mid-roll was supposed to be. So we're doing fantastic. There's this breather where they're going to do repairs on the rig as they're driving. Furiosa goes, under the rig to do things, which, did we say that Furiosa is badass?
I don't think we've mentioned it, so we'll just say that now. You're hearing this for the first time. The official JWF, John Webster Film, JWF, the official JWF stance is that Furiosa is indeed badass.
And then there's this moment where the girl with the red hair finds that Nux is, in the back of the rig, and there's this really tender moment between them where she's beginning to try and show him that he doesn't have to,
follow
what he's been and follow Joe. And he says he thought he was being spared for something, that, and he should be walking with the Immortan and feasting with the heroes of all time. And she says the words, "I'd say it was your manifest destiny not to."
Yeah, she's starting to change his outlook on life.
Yeah, and
his purpose in the world.
Yeah, and it's really kind of sad because he's literally marked for death because he has the tumors on his shoulder, which he calls his mates, Larry and Barry.
Which was pretty devastating moment.
Yeah. So it's easy to see that, he sort of, got a bit of a crush on her, but I think also holds her up as this, I don't know if he necessarily feels that way about the wives. I think that she kind of becomes this figure of his salvation.
And he respects, I think, their bravery because they're brave to do this.
Yeah.
So we have that scene, and I was going to just move on unless you were going to stick with this a little more. So they're planting bombs. So they kind of have this a little bit of guerrilla warfare thing going on. And then we kind of pan over to Immortan Joe and the pregnant woman who is dying. And there's I don't want to use the word doctor because it looks very, even before medieval, like really, really low things. Like, I know, right? We hardly get their names. And I'm not saying this is a feminist movie. Aaron, I'm applying feminist analysis to it. Not necessarily the same thing, but I get what you're saying.
And I will say, and because I have actually, made a point to say their names, but they are really weird names, and they're given to the women. There's no way these are.
No, I think Immortan Joe gave them these names, so I don't even know if calling them by this names would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, those are not natural, names that they, I mean, they are very much given. I think you're right by Joe. So
I think so.
So in a way, I almost feel uneasy calling them that. But no, and actually,
it is in some ways.
I agree with Aaron. I think this is a feminist film. But yeah, I'm not going to argue too much.
Please, man, tell us two women how we should feel. I'm just kidding, John. You know I love you. I just want to say, so we have this doctor scene. I use the term doctor, but he's looking at the woman and he reports to Immortan Joe and says she's dying. She's breathing her last, right? And he says, get the kid out of her, get the baby out of her, right? And so he cuts the child out of her. And the first thing that he asks is it a male? Is it a boy? He doesn't ask, is the baby healthy? Is it alive? Is my wife going to live? No. Is it a male? Right? He wants to know. And turns out it is a boy, but it is a stillborn. It is not alive. It was a preemie. It needed another month of development to live. And there's this really uncomfortable for me, John, scene where he tells his son that the kind of bronze to the other son's brains that it was a boy, it was a baby brother and perfect in every way. And he goes, oh, I would have had a brother and perfect in every way. It's grody. I'm sorry. It just is, because if that were a girl, this scene would have just been like, okay, it was a girl. We're done. Right. Yeah. But it said it was a boy. What a great loss. Screw you, patriarchy. I'm drinking. Like that one line and this idea of male, and I'm just going to, small tangent, I swear, John, I'm going to keep it as short as I can. This idea of male birth preference is very big in the idea of also female infanticide, which was a big problem in China, especially the last two dynasties of China, and also a problem in India where you had people either killing female babies or they would go get an ultrasound and realize it was a girl and then abort the child, right? There's this sex selectiveness. So he thought, oh, it was a boy, what a great loss. Whereas if it were a daughter, he would have been like, well, that sucks, but oh well, right? So we really have this really large, and I think you are right, Aaron, that this is really a feminist movie in this case of it's really arguing against sex selective birth, right? In this scene. And it's really showing Immortan Joe as being a very careless and evil individual. Yes, this Jenna McGirl, I love you so much. You're right. Yeah, they're like feminism, exploding cars, but also a little bit more feminism, exploding cars. Yes, it was definitely the commercialism of the exploding cars. But you're right that it is kind of weaved in throughout, in between the exploding cars.
And even then, that didn't get that didn't help to sway a lot of the toxic male fan base who didn't want any of that. They were like, yeah, I read a lot of stuff and saw a lot of videos on Twitter at the time, like, get your feminism out of my Mad Max. And it's like, dude.
The men on the internet not being okay, you mean I've read, I don't know, because I was on Reddit and saw a lot of posts against the new Ghostbusters film with women in it. And it was all very supportive, John, coming from men. I don't know what you're talking about. They don't get their boxers in a bunch at all about this kind of stuff.
Never.
Never. It's true, though. It's so true. Yeah, and this was very much it's very much a male franchise, and so that's what I love about Fury Road, and that it finally kind of infuses these themes that are important, and that's the thing about feminism and feminist analysis is it's not a new thing, and we're just now this is something that has been in women and men's and non-binary individuals' hearts for years. They've known that there should be better roles for women in movies, and that there should be more recognition of women's work and women's contributions. And we're just now kind of starting to talk about it. That doesn't mean all of a sudden men are going to be oppressed. All right. It just means we're going to equal it a little bit, and you're just going to have to cry in your oatmeal about it and get over it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. All right, John, so let's move on from the is it a male thing, because I could talk about that forever, because I also read a lot of queer and feminist analysis. But let's move on.
The way that Richest cries out, like I said before, he's the ultimate representation of a man-child.
Yes.
Which may or may not be relevant to topic.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about. Our country's leadership is very adult.
And Immortan Joe doesn't resemble anybody.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Especially not in the ugly looks. So,
yeah.
boom, shots fired. But the rig gets stuck after this scene, right?
I do want to. I'm sorry, what was that?
Go ahead. I was going to move on with the movie. What were you going to say?
No, I was just saying, and then we come to where, the posse, as we'll call it, has come to a stop, and the bullet farmer comes off, and he's like, what are we waiting for? He actually pulls a bullet from his mouth. He's got bullets for teeth. And the other guy is like, be careful, don't damage the assets. Because that guy's all about, he's counting the cost of things. And of course, that includes the women and
the loss of property.
Yeah. And he says, just one angry shot for Furiosa.
But the rig is stuck at this point. The war rig is stuck in the sand, right? So they are being pursued and they can't move forward. And this is another heroic scene for Max and for Nux as well.
Yeah, there's some great lines in this where actually this movie is great at giving you little bits of humor just when you need it. Because when the rig starts moving again and Nux is driving it, and Furiosa looks at Max, realizes he's not driving, and they're both like, wait, what? And then and Capable says, he wants to help. And Toast says, who? The war boy. Where did he come from? I thought we threw him off the rig.
Right? It's like, and it's like, no, this war boy is okay, right? I mean, it would literally be like you're trying to escape from Jonestown, and then you're being helped by a follower of Jonestown. You're like, why is this guy here? Isn't he on the other side? Right? And it's so you're exactly right, John. And there's this little bit of comedic relief. Right. And that's what's really good about this movie. But so you have Nux helping out, and you had Mad Max or Max, like tying it to this tree, and the tree is starting to fall. So it's also a little bit of tension. Like, is this tree going to help pull the rig? I think it's going to fall, and the rig's just going to be stuck. But no, it's like last minute it makes it. And that's a really good scene too. The tension and the buildup. Really good in that scene.
And there's a couple moments I want to highlight. One is, first of all, Furiosa is not having it with Nux because she's like keeping a gun pointed at him, because it's like, nope.
You cannot trust him.
No. Yeah. And so while this little debate is going on.
Sorry, Steven has a good line about Nazis. Why is this Nazi home? Exactly. You would automatically be suspicious, right?
Yeah.
It's just funny because of the skinhead thing. I'm sorry.
but so they're having this sort of debate about nuts, and and then the dad says, where's the line right here? Say, anyone notice that bright light, encroaching gunfire? It's just these great comedic lines. It's like, come on, guys, let's pay attention. And then at one point, I'm going to geek out about this because music, the music from Verdi's Requiem called Dies Irae starts playing, and it's actually played kind of softly here, which I was curious about because one of the trailers used the music like full blast, and I think it's incredibly epic. But I like that they use that, and it's when the bullet farmer is like going crazy. Ooh, no, we forgot to touch on one moment when Max is trying to take the bullet farmer out, but they only have so many shots of the gun, and so he fires off, misses. Furiosa, or no, it's I'm really sorry. Aaron, do not call me out. I'm trying to constantly keep all the names straight, but they're unusual names. I'm doing my best. It's Toast says, you got 2 shots left, and so he fires once more, doesn't make it, and then Furiosa comes up behind him, and I love this moment where he knows she's the better shot, so he gives up the gun and lets her do it, and she makes the shot. It's such a great moment of, it's the opposite of the toxic masculinity of Joe and Richest and their entire horde, where he's acknowledging that she's a better shot. There's no, his pride isn't wounded by it or anything like that. And he trusts her, and they're working together. So I think that's a fantastic moment.
That is really a great scene. Yeah.
But then the bullet farmer is blinded. And at this point, he's lashing out in rage. And like, this is a great kind of, it shows about the gun culture and all that, where he's just charging forward. He's holding out his guns like this as the music starts going off. And let me bring up the line right here. I am the scales of justice, conductor of the choir of death. Sing, brother heckler. Sing, brother cook. Sing, brothers. Sing. Sing. And he's talking about his guns. And it's like, that's gun culture personified.
I also want to just emphasize when he says scales of justice, Lady Liberty, who is blind, is a woman holding the scales of justice too. So he's invoking, the Statue of Liberty. I know obviously it's post-apocalyptic, but right, liberty and justice and everything tends to have a feminine aspect to it. So for him to be yelling that way when literally holding 2 phallic symbols in his hands, I mean, there's a lot going on in this movie that I really caught on a rewatch, especially when I had my handy dandy notebook and was writing some notes that we really got. But you're totally right in that he's the not just the epitome of, the symbolism of toxic masculinity, but also expressing this masculinity through guns, through like I said, they're phallic symbols. It's literally a long thing that shoots things out of it. I mean, you can't get more than that, more phallic than that. So, so we have that going on, but they do escape this time. There's all these like harrowing escapes. See you later, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
So we do have these little kind of harrowing escapes. And so they do, unless you want to talk more about this scene, John, I was going to say we kind of move on to where they're headed towards the green place.
I will just say there's this moment of where, Max is, leaving to try and handle the bullet farmer, the bullet farmer, and Furiosa says, what if you're not back by the time the engine's cool? And he says, well, you keep going.
Yeah.
I like that there is this trust that's developed between them, and even concern on her part. And he's like, no, you gotta just keep going.
And this is where you realize too that the trust has been built, and that they do at this point kind of care about each other. They kind of care about what happens. And he knows that it's kind of this idea of the mission is bigger than all of them, right? Completing the mission is more important than one person. And I think that is really what is encapsulated in that scene. So yeah, that's a great thing to talk about. But they move on, right? And they do, it's so true, thespians. So we do have that. And so he does make it, he gets back on the roar rig, right? Max is there and he asks her, right? He kind of, you can tell he's a little frustrated with the mission. He said, how do you even know that this green place exists, right? That their destination exists. And we get a little bit of Furiosa's backstory. And she says that she's from there and that she was stolen, right? And so this is where we learn that the faith of the women's the faith that they have of this green place also comes from Furiosa's faith in it. She has these good memories of it, and she knows that it is a place of plenty and a place of comfort, and she wants to take them there so that they can live happily and they could have their children, right? We have one that is ready. Well, we did have one that was ready to give birth, unfortunately, but we do have another one who is newly pregnant, right? And so that they can have a good future. And so this is where her optimism comes from. This whole time we're wondering, where's her hope coming from? And it's because she's from there, right? And so their destination for her is a homecoming, right? A returning to home. And that's really, really important, I think, theme in this movie is what is home, right? And what is comfort. And for her, it's the green place, right? And green also has this idea of new life and of flourishing and of sustenance.
Patter, sometimes I don't know what you're going on about, but
I think he's just on a different level than we are, John. Okay. And so we just can't. But they're driving, and then we get to this scene which we alluded to earlier where I said it's a trap, but John has the quote correctly, especially now that I'm looking at my notes, where they see this naked woman at the top of this kind of honestly, it looks like a lifeguard's tower, kind of a really tall one, and she's at the top screaming, "Help me, help me." And Furiosa looks at it, and like you were saying, John, Max says, that's bait.
Which honestly, like, I'm going to mention again that it's one of the best Twitter memes ever created because, there's nothing but Twitter bait, and you always have to be on the lookout for it, and that's a great response.
Exactly.
And this is an incredibly beautiful scene. And really just starting with the previous scene where Max and Furiosa are having their heart-to-heart, this is just a great example of how this movie is able to go from that nonstop crazy action to these beautiful human moments.
Yeah.
And she gets out of the war rig and calls out to them to let them know that she's part of their tribe.
She evokes the name of her mother, which she may not have said out loud for years. Right. Yeah. And it's very, very emotional, I think. And this, a little bit after this scene is where we'll see Furiosa show emotion for the first time, and it's very impactful.
Yeah, and so they know who she is, and there's a reunion between Furiosa and this character.
The many mothers, I believe.
And this character is called the Valkyrie, which just seems like a perfect name.
And actually, John, can I just mention one thing before we move on? I just wanted to say, when you see them coming down from the dunes on their motorcycles, they're covered up, and from a distance, we've only seen men on motorcycles, it looks like it's men coming in, right? And then you see that all of a sudden it's women, and it changes kind of the temperament of the scene.
And of course, they're immediately like, who are the men?
Yes, suspicion automatically. Yeah.
Furiosa has to
vouch for them.
They're reliable. They helped us get here.
Yeah.
Because as we've seen throughout the course of the entire film, there's good reason not to trust the men.
Absolutely. And also, they trust her almost automatically because they realize she's the daughter of one of them. But who are these random dudes here, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is when Furiosa gets the bad news about the green place.
That they've already actually gone past it, and it's, as they call it, the creepy place with the crows. And so all the green is gone, the water is sour, poisonous. So you just have this remainder of the many mothers who are just surviving.
Danny's comment. I'm sorry.
Sure, I'll put it up. Why not?
Please do. Okay. I would say this is why I shouldn't drink during streams, but I think this is why I should drink during streams. So we get then what I think you used for the thumbnail for this video, John, which is we finally get Furiosa just breaking down. She falls to her knees and she realizes that the green place is gone. The promised land is gone. Their destination is no more. She's brought these women, all across this desert to nowhere.
And this is just the moment where she finally just lets all of her emotion pour out, because she's shown anger up to this point, but this is just pain and frustration and
despair.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful the way this is shot, where you've got the sand, sort of the wind blowing the sand over, like a layer over the sand, and the music. Her theme is so beautiful in contrast to most of the other music in the film. It's this sort of soaring, melancholy music. So you just feel that pain, and her scream almost fades into the background, beneath the music. And yeah, it's painful. I think we as the audience hate to see her, go through this, and
on the first watch, we think this place exists, right? Yeah. We think that if they can just make it, then they've got it, then they're saved. But then we find out that's not the case. And that we're devastated as the audience too.
Yeah. And at this point, we're not really entirely sure where the movie is going to go. We do get a nice scene where some bonding between all the women of Joe's wives and the many mothers. And I do like the dynamic that forms between the Dag and the Keeper of the Seeds. All these names are like, some of them are just weird, some of them are mythical.
Yes. And this is where we find out that she is pregnant, right? And she says one of my favorite lines, where she says, "Warlord Jr., he's gonna be so ugly." I just love it. Because this is yet another example of her lashing out at the man who has hurt her so, who's owned her, who has raped her, who has degraded her and made her into an object, right? And it's just so, I just love that line. And she sees it as this kind of like curse upon her womb, really.
And it's interesting that I think the women have sort of built up the many mothers in their minds, where when the Keeper of the Seed says, she shot everyone she's ever met out here, hedgehogs, all of them, right here in the back. And the dad says, somehow I thought you girls were above all that. And that's when she shows her the seeds and, what she's tried to plant, but the earth is so sour that nothing it takes. So, I wonder if those seeds will make it to a place where there is some green. We're going to have to wait and see.
Well, and the seeds are a representation of new life. And I think even though, the woman who is newly pregnant says Warlord Jr. is going to be so ugly, there is hope for new life, right? If they do move beyond Immortan Joe and she could raise the baby herself, that there is this idea of the possibility of new beginnings. And the seeds represent that as well.
Now, we get an exchange between Max and Furiosa where she says they're basically going to put all the gasoline into the bites and try and make their way across the salt, in the hope that there's something, on the other side of it and that they'll make it. She says, "You're welcome to join us," to which he says, "No, I'll make my own way." And then he says the line, "Hope is a mistake.
If you can't fix what is broken, you'll go insane." I paused the movie and wrote that down because that really was like,
which,
yeah,
we certainly haven't gotten hinted at topical things before in this stream, but this really did hit.
This is not at all relevant, John. I have no idea what you're alluding to.
But this really did hit close.
Yeah.
I think we can all feel that in the world we're living in, that hope isn't enough. As he says, you have to fix what's broken. And so I really felt that line.
Definitely.
And then, of course, the next morning, we get that solitary moment with Max really, once again, hearing the voices of his past, the people that he failed to help. And the last voice we hear is actually his son, who's calling out, Papa. And so that's a callback to the older Mad Max films, but it's really the first indication in this iteration that Max was a father and that he had this life beforehand. So this whole film, we've gotten the idea that he's dealing with a lot of ghosts in his past. And
yeah. And that's when I think he also realizes that, and there's, I think we were talking with Micah about this, where there was this meme online where you describe a movie in the most boring way possible, and it was people drive out in the desert and then go back. And this is where they decide they have to go back, right?
Actually, it's funny because one of the producers behind the film, I think, actually said something similar, where he said the movie can be summed up as, first there's a chase, then there's a race.
Yeah.
And that's the movie in a nutshell.
But they realize, Max tells them, if you go this way, there's nothing. If you go that way, there's nothing. Where's the place where there's food and water? And the answer is the Citadel, where they've come from, right? That's the only guarantee that they have, right?
Yeah. I want to read that point off because there's some moments like Max seems like this brooding, hulking figure who's almost at times humorless, but this is another one of those comedic moments that I really do like, where he rides up to catch up to them and he says to Furiosa, "This is your way home," and he points at the map and points to the Citadel, and she says, "We go back," and he goes, like, just like simple, like, yep. and then one of them says, "I thought you weren't insane anymore."
Right? Like, I thought you found some bit of sanity. Yeah.
And then he says, "Look, it'll be a hard day, but I guarantee you that 160 days ride that way, there's nothing but salt. At least that way we might be able to, together, come across some kind of redemption."
And redemption is all that Max is about at this point, right? Because he has all this PTSD from who he couldn't save. And here are people that now he could save and redeem himself, right?
Yeah. And I do like that there's a, and then
let me just be honest right now, John. When I first
Yeah,
saw
go
this movie and they moved back, they went back, I didn't get it. Rewatch, I totally got it. It's like there's nothing else. What are they going to do? And not to mention, the Citadel is a place where there are people crying out to be free and they could be their saviors. So there's also these people who are caught in this, you know, the war boys are a part of this cult, but the common people are just getting the scraps and they deserve a chance to make their own way. And so the first time I saw this, I was like, wow, this is like we went full circle. Well, back to where we began, but that's not how this movie ends.
But isn't that like so awesome that's what the movie is? It's basically, yep, we drove at her. We're just driving back now. But there's so much underneath it.
Yes.
And it's like the barest, the thinnest possible plot. I know we joked about the plot.
Yeah.
the actual plot is very thin, but there's just so much underneath it.
Well, and I think what it's saying is stop looking for the grass being greener on the other side. Better what you have now, which is what I argue about colonizing the moon or colonizing Mars. Like, we're destroying the planet now, so maybe we should like get our own house in order before we want to go have moon colonies, right? And that's the same idea of let's better the Citadel because we already have a civilization established rather than going to this, grass is greener on the other side. Promised land.
If there is any grass, which
we find out there isn't, right? And so they find out the promised land isn't going to work. So they need to better where they came from, right?
Yeah.
Which is what they do. They turn around. I'm sorry, people. Spoiler alert. That's what happens. They have to turn around.
And there's actually a deleted scene because it occurred to me rewatching, probably because I've seen the deleted scene. This might be a question some people asked as to why are Joe and his forces spread out at this point? It's because they're looking for Furiosa and
they're scouting
and the women. So they're spread out, and so Max says we head right down the middle, back the way we came through the pass, and so that's exactly what they do. And this catches Joe and his forces off guard, where Richest is like, well, why are they going back? Do they wish to surrender? He's such a dumbass.
My God, he's such a dumbass. And then Immortan Joe goes, oh crap, the Citadel isn't defended. They took their whole army and they went to
Which might not have been the wisest idea.
Oh, really? I don't know what you're talking about, John. No. Yeah, no, that was not a good war strategy, by the way, Immortan Joe. No, and that's the thing. And this has happened many times in history where the army, the main army has been sent out and then there wasn't anyone to protect, the main base of things. This happened a lot in Chinese history where the emperor sent out all of his troops and then there was no one to protect him, right? So that's exactly what's happening. They're just hoofing it back to the Citadel. I mean, pedal to the metal, going back on the Fury Road, back to the Citadel. And then Immortan Joe is kind of stuck with this thing in his hand. He's like, oh crap, we got to get back into the cars and go after them. And this is once, like you were saying, John, these comedic moments in the movie. This is another one of those comedic moments where it's like, oh crap, we got to scramble and get back to our respective cars and like go, right? And they're just like, that war rig is, they mention how many horsepower it is. It's a lot. It's the like kind of you get the idea that it's the alpha vehicle, right, that they have. That's the best vehicle. And so they're just using all those horsepower to go back. And it's really a funny scene, but it's also kind of a triumphant scene. And at that point, you're really rooting for them because if they can make it and if they can also defeat the posse going after them, if they just kill them out there in the desert and then go back to the Citadel, they can change things for the better.
Yeah. So we get to now it's the race back to the canyon pass. And of course, Slick decides to come up right alongside them on top of
creepo.
Max's interceptor car, which like, dude, you really want to be dead now, don't you? Just Max is like, that's mine. But but just like, yeah, this is insane. Look at this shot with him hanging over the side.
Crazy.
It's like, this movie is so off the wall crazy.
It's so ridiculous, and it leans into it, and it is unabashedly ridiculous. So we have this scene, right? And I don't remember exactly how it happens because I was just so enthralled. I didn't even have a chance to write it down, but they get them, right? They defeat. Bye, Mike. I'll see you on the Zoom. But they defeat the bad guy in this scene.
Okay, well, I did actually take some notes.
Okay, good, because I don't remember exactly how it happened.
So we can go through, because we obviously have to fill out the time.
I know we've hardly had anything to talk about, John.
Okay, so there is this moment before it all starts where the dad gets praying, and somebody says, and what are you doing? She said, praying to who? Anyone that's listening. What I really love is seeing the many mothers who are also known as the Bubolini getting in on this battle
and sacrificing themselves.
Yeah, because there's only like 2 of them that make it back. So yeah, you got some great moments, especially with the Valkyrie, who's firing off her gun at Joe. Unfortunately, she goes down in like a horrible way where the people eater just, again, a great name. It rides right over her gleefully, and you're just like, dude, die.
Yeah, seriously.
And he does get used as a shield by Max later on. So he's not long for the world.
Does he have gout or something? What's up with that?
Yeah, because Max uses his foot to like slam down on the pedal to keep the vehicle going.
And it's like, you deserve it so hard, right?
And that's like, and that's close to a moment where Max gets like out of the car and like jumps off as
once again, guys, exploding cars,
explosions. It's like, it's so great. But let me hit a couple other moments where we get the polecats, which you can see right here.
Oh my God, the poles. That's where it's like, okay, we're just gonna keep going with the ridiculous, like insane, special effect. I mean, it was really well done, the choreography on this.
Yeah, and they're just like all over the place. And there's this one moment where, the roof of the car on the rig is torn off, and one of the polecats comes in and grabs Toast and pulls her out, and her legs are kicking, and the choreography is astounding. Just that they managed to pull this stuff off safely. I know George Miller was terrified every single day because they had to be so careful with every single moment of shooting, because so many of it was like stunt after stunt every single day. And there's even this moment where Max is picked up by one of them, and like his head is like taken down near the ground, and it's just
lots of tension there. And this is supposed to be kind of the finale scene too, so they've added this with the poles. They've added this extra tension, which is what makes it feel like the climax, the finale, the kind of last kind of Well,
it's like, and you can't go into this scene just doing a retread of what we saw in the earlier chases. You've got to amplify things and add another element so the audience isn't sitting there getting bored.
Oh, another car chase. Yeah. It's like, oh no, car chase with poles. Like, it just ups it a little bit extra, right?
And there's another great moment where Max falls off the side of the rig, and Furiosa catches him, and further cementing that bond that they have, where they keep like saving each other's lives at different points. But then that's followed by one of the creepy dudes with this mask on that's got like a baby face on the back, and then takes that knife and stabs her, and then music blasts out and she screams, and
I have a thing with baby dolls and dolls in general, so that freaked me out. I could not with that. Padar has a good one, which is Cirque du Soleil on motorbikes.
Yeah,
Really, yeah, it was
what it
great
is.
feats of acrobatics. It was crazy, and it was a crazy scene. I'm sorry, I don't have much to say except for, I mean, the choreography was so well done. It's amazing.
Bernie.
Right? Bernie, hey girl. Yeah, right? The spectacle
yeah.
of it. Just amazing.
And again, I go back to, I'm in complete agreement with Bernie here, where like when I saw the previews for this movie, it was not my genre, or, I was not a fan of the other films. I hadn't even seen them really, but there's just something about the way this looks and the audacity of all the stunt work. And
I went in it being like, okay, Charlize Theron, I'm in. And then I get this, yeah, all the hotties. Anyway, I'm sorry, I blacked out for a second. What? No, I went in with Charlize Theron thirst, and I left with such appreciation for the cinematography and the choreography and just the bravery of these actors to do this stuff. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of them had stunt doubles, but it was insane what they were able to do with this.
Yeah, and while we're speaking about the actors, it's important to note here that it's been well documented that Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron's off-camera dynamic during the making of this movie was actually quite similar to the early dynamic between Max and Furiosa. So that may have added some tension to the production, but what the final product speaks for itself. It's just absolutely
gorgeous.
Brilliant.
But the main thing I'm sorry, I keep trying to move us forward, mostly because I have to pee, but also because the bad guy dies. They get the bad guy.
Yeah, well, he's like, there's this moment where Furiosa sees Toast in the vehicle, and she shoots like dagger eyes at him, and it's like, she's coming for you, man. This is and so she does get up to him where and it's funny because she says to Nux at one point, her voice very weak, I'm going to need you to drive. And on the one hand, we think it's because she's not going to be able to keep driving because she's been stabbed and she's injured. But no, it's really because she has to get out of the vehicle and she has to go take care of Joe. And there's that great moment. She's like, remember me?
Yeah.
And
she wanted to be the one to do it.
Yeah. And so his part of his face gets torn off, and it's appropriately gruesome.
Yeah. Like that, and I'm the gore queen. A lot of you that know me know that. I have a real high tolerance for gore, and I especially love when gore is significant and relevant to the plot. And that is definitely this scene. This is the epitome of relevant gore. And she just rips it off of him, and he needs that to live. I think we're basically kind of led to believe. Correct?
Well, it's also it's attached to his face, and the way she uses whatever, if that's a spear or whatever, because part of his actual face rips off with it.
Yeah.
And so, and there's this moment where one of them says, "He's dead. Joe is dead," and there's a look on Nux's face. It's like he's finally fully liberated.
He's free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is the moment where he sacrifices himself because they need to press forward and somebody needs to collapse the passageway. Of course, not before. It bears mentioning that we do get the Doof Warrior one more time because Max has a scuttle with him, and his mask actually comes off, and it's just this disgusting face. It's like,
man needs a dentist.
Yeah. But even at this point, he's still going at it with the guitar.
Yeah, but he sacrifices himself, Nux does, to save the war rig and to save those that are on it so that they can continue going back to the Citadel. And at this point, those are great shots, John. But at this point, Furiosa has lost a lot of blood too. So she's also, she used kind of her last bit of energy to get revenge, and not just get revenge, but also to kill Immortan Joe because of what he's done to others, not just her.
Yeah.
You know, she's doing it for all the women, men, and non-binary individuals out there who have been hurt by him. Yes, the guitar, Bernie, it's the best. And what does Max do? He becomes a blood bag again, but this time not without consent, right? Consent is a very big part of this movie. He willingly gives her his life force, his blood, to try and save her.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful moment. I mean, she kind of, I don't think she expects to make it back. So she's saying to him, you know, home, get them home. But then he gives the blood, and there's that moment where it's actually the first time he says his name to anyone in the film, except for the opening narration where he says, Max, my name is Max.
Yeah, before that he was blood bag and fool, right?
Yeah. And I really do think that that's him coming sort of around to recognizing himself after probably being alone for so long. And it just goes back to what we were saying earlier about the fact that the movie starts off and he is just an animal who's lost a lot of sense of himself.
Yeah, he has a self-actualization, and he reclaims his name and reclaims his identity. And he also, I think, and this is my interpretation, he forgives himself a little bit for who he failed to save, because he is now saving people in the present.
Yeah. So we do get to the final scene where they arrive back at the Citadel, and you know, Max gets out of the vehicle and shows everybody Immortan Joe.
Can I just say, I love this scene. I'm sorry, I just have to say, they throw him down and people just start like ripping at him, like ripping his arm off, and it's just like victory. Like that is just meant for the audience specifically to be like, yeah, screw that guy. Woo! You know, just like rip him up. And the common people have been terrorized by this man. He holds back their food and holds back their water as he sees fit, right? And they realize he's just a man, and he is, he's mortal and he can die, and now he's dead. Let's just rip him up. It was just a great scene.
Yeah, and I love their chanting, let them up, let them up.
Yeah. Yeah, so they drive onto this platform that can be, taken up by chains. And so it's kind of the common people kind of rallying behind Furiosa and the crew, basically.
And this is kind of a weird moment. At first, Max is, up on there with them, and then in some way he, makes his way actually off of the platform that's being lifted off. So he's down below. And now that I think about that, just really does add to the idea of him as a specter almost of this.
Yes, he's a ghost. Yeah, he's not really real, right?
Yeah, and so he does fade into the background, even to the point where one shot, the wide shot, he seems to disappear as he sort of vanished. And there is this idea of like, realistically, as a flesh and blood man, where's he going to go at this point?
Yeah.
I mean, well, for one thing, he doesn't have a car. But secondly, if he's already been back the way he came from, and he knows there's nothing lying ahead, so realistically, there's probably nowhere to go. But again, coming back to this idea of him as a thing of legend, of entering the story and then leaving it. And leaving Furiosa and the women to build, their own future. And then of course we get that amazing final shot, with them rising up and the camera, they're going underneath. And it's just a splendid ending. It's
And notice her mechanical arm is gone. She's kind of
Yeah.
stripped bare. And one of her eyes is so injured that it's closed shut. So there are these marks of her battle, her struggle throughout the movie.
Yeah. And then the movie ends, and it actually ends with a quote, which, let me see if I can recall it. Where must we go, those of us in search of our better selves? There's something to that effect, but I think ending it with that, as opposed to the usual thing you might see in a film is to start with a quote, but I think ending with it really lends this feeling of that this is a story being told, that it's a myth.
Yeah.
And
this goes back to my original point of oral storytelling, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of the coda, like right at the end of it.
So we did it. We got through to
Boy, did we do it, John.
Just a couple of quick points. We won't spend as long as I originally planned on them because we're over 2.5 hours in and Amy's got to run to the bathroom. So, but I do want to say that this film made an impact that I don't think a lot of people expected. And it ended up receiving, it got critical raves. It did very well at the box office, and it got 10 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director.
I did not expect to like it, and I did. I don't like car chases. Like, I've seen Fast and the Furious, and I never liked it, really, except for Tokyo Drift, and I will stand by that. But I didn't think I would like it, and I did. I mean, it surprised the crap out of me, this movie.
Yeah. And I know I got really excited on Oscar night, even though I don't think much of the awards, but
I know you're not obsessed with them or anything, John.
But it was really cool because they won a bunch of awards in a row, and they ended up winning 6. Even though I was a little disgruntled that George Miller didn't at least get Best Director, but the film still did remarkably well, and yeah, I think it's pretty much been solidified as a new classic. And then also, okay. So the prequel that's coming up, the Furiosa prequel, which is
we need more of her.
Which, like, at first I was like, I want Charlize, but if they're doing a prequel and she's going to be younger, I guess they might have used CGI, but that's always kind of distracting to see someone de-aged. So I don't even know if that would have been preferable. The actress they're bringing on is Anya Taylor-Joy, who, for people who have seen the film Emma, and also she did the voice of Brea in The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. Of course, I had to mention that.
You have no attachment to the neither do I. I have Dark Crystal. What is that? We have no attachment to this franchise at all.
It's like, and I love this. It's my revenge against Steven that I have a co-host who is also into Dark Crystal. So, so it'll be starring her and apparently also Chris Hemsworth. So what are you thinking about this? Are we excited?
I'm definitely excited. I also, I want this character to be built up more. We really, oh, thank you so much. You're so sweet, Cam. Yeah, I really want to know more, and I want to get a little bit more of her character backstory and build up. And so I think I'm really excited about this. And I'm also very optimistic about what they can do, especially after seeing this movie. I really think that they can do a lot with it. And I'm, of course, John, you might be surprised to learn that I'm excited about having not only one movie, but 2 that are focused on a strong female main character. So,
is that something you're interested in, Amy?
Honestly, I think men should rule the world, and all movies should be written and about men. So.
Oh my God. Somebody's getting an audio recording of that.
No, don't use that against me. That was my sarcasm voice, I swear.
But no, like, everybody should be looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
It's and the fact that it is George Miller directing. Like if it was handed off to somebody else, I'd be like, I don't know if I want that. But the fact that he's going to be doing it, like what he did with this film was so extraordinary that if he says he wants to go with another actress for a younger Furiosa, then I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on that. And plus, I do think Anya Taylor-Joy is incredibly talented, so it'll be interesting to see her her perspective. Oh God, there you go, Amy.
No, and that's my that's my friend. We've been best friends. I just want to say this right now. Jenna has been my best friend since 5th grade. So this is definitely, I've tried to say canceled, but my autocorrect on my phone. I have it. Yeah.
See,
now our weekly calls are canceled, Jenna. No, she's been my best friend since 5th grade. So she's joking. God, I hope.
Those are the ones you got to watch out for. Amy.
I know, right? Jenna, I supported you in middle school when you had your identity crisis. Come on.
Okay. So real quick, as we close up, promote your blog and your channel, Amy. Go.
Yes. Once again, aswaffchineselit.wordpress.com is my blog. Yes, that's right, Jenna. I love you. So my YouTube channel, I read the blog, I read the essays to you, and sometimes I have special people on the channel to discuss it. So you should really subscribe, like, comment, do all the things. And if you follow me on Twitter, like I said, you can get in on those sweet, sweet polls. So you should do that.
You need to do that because that is Amy's elixir of life.
That's the only reason that I'm still alive today is because I answered my goal. My last poll got 300 responses and I fainted. So there was that.
That is to Amy what orange juice is to me. So,
or what margaritas are to me. And I did finish this throughout the stream. So you're welcome, YouTube.
Okay, so I will just say tomorrow.
Can I just plug though your last stream though? You had a great stream on Master and Commander with Kelly, aka Jaded Redhead, Shakes of Thrones, who looks at Shakespeare in A Song of Ice and Fire, and she wore an amazing costume for it. And your good friend, and also now becoming my good friend, Laura. And you had a great conversation, and then we had a watch party too, watching Master and Commander, and that was wonderful.
It was great. I really enjoyed getting to do that with you, seeing it for the first time. That was a lot of fun because, I mean, our watch parties have been amazing because I've never really gotten to watch movies with friends before. So it's just been a great experience, especially with something like Master and Commander that is such a favorite of mine, getting to, be there with my friends as they experience those movies for the first time. It brings me a lot of joy. I do want to say that stream though is very, very close to 900 views. So if you haven't watched that go watch
that stream. And also as a violinist, I just have to say I enjoy the score immensely. Great music, great acting, really great cinematography, and they talk all about it in that stream, and you should definitely check it out.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to plug Here Be Dragons tomorrow, which I will be on with Steven Stark, my co-host, and my other co-host, and we're going to be talking about the film The Crow, which I've never seen, so I gotta get on that tonight.
Do your homework, John.
Yeah. And so next week here on this channel, same time, we'll be discussing the film The Others.
I will be in costume, so come to see that.
Another film I haven't seen, and this is the influence that Amy is wielding because she's been trying to get me to do horror movies, and this will be the first movie that's all horror and not part of another genre. So
I'm so excited. This has been my favorite horror movie since I was a kid. And once again, I will be in costume. So come to see that. I don't know, John. John might dress up as a Lord of the Rings fan. Oh, wait, hold up. You're already in that costume.
Am I?
So please come to see me dressed up as my favorite DC character. And we're going to talk about, yes, and it has Nicole Kidman in it, The Others. It's an amazing film. And I think that the acting, the writing, and the directing, everything about it is flawless, and I think John is going to like it too. I hope, because we're going to talk about it for 2 hours. So
See, so Charlize Theron, Nicole Kidman, are we noticing a trend? I don't know.
I don't know what I'm so parched. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so I do want to say, though, if you enjoyed tonight and you want to come back for next week and all our future streams and you haven't subscribed, please click that little logo in the corner and hit subscribe.
And I, too, have a channel that you can subscribe to, so you should do that as well.
Do it. You'll find the links in the description. Yeah, and so I will just add that. Oh, also want to say once again, next month I'll be doing my interview with author Doug Adams about his book, The Music of the Lord of the Rings films. And we're going to be geeking out about Lord of the Rings, film music in general, his book, all that great stuff. So definitely stay tuned for more information on that. And yeah, I guess that's it. Amy, I had a great time. Like, this was a fantastic first official co-hosting stream. And
the best part is it's one of many, John. We're going to get to do this almost every week. I am going to take a week off every now and then, but otherwise it's going to be you and me and sometimes a couple of guests, and we're going to have just a great time. And the future of John Webster Film is bright.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, I was a little bit worried with all the action in this film that we might not be able to fill out the full 2 hours of discussion. But
you mean 3 hours, John? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we fell a little short, didn't we?
Yeah.
There's 10 minutes there's 10 minutes to go until the 3 hour mark. So anyway, thank you guys for tuning in, and yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, and we will both be back next week. So have a wonderful night. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.